Chapter 1847. Outside, a group of challengers was watching the show. However, Han Fei was very focused at this moment. He had many ways to directly break that terrifying sword strike. However, he hadn't thought of a way to break this sword strike without causing any impact at all. In fact, the key to breaking this sword strike was not to break it itself, nor was it to protect the torch. If it was just to protect the torch, Han Fei could engrave arrays around the torch. But in this way, he would lose the meaning of challenging this sword strike. So far, it seemed that all the levels that Han Fei had experienced were prepared for this one. This wisp of sword intent contained too many elements. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Han Fei was still retreating, reaching out to the other side of the sword chi. Han Fei tried to extract the power of this wisp of sword chi with the knife drawing technique. However, he couldn't really do it, although Han Fei had passed 17 levels in a row. In fact, the distance between each level was no more than a kilometer. It seemed that he could completely retreat. However, Han Fei didn't want to retreat. Therefore, Han Fei had to retreat within a kilometer to find a way to break this blow. Similarly, if it was to pass for the sake of passing, Han Fei had already passed. However, what Han Fei wanted was the completion rate. For others, this was a pass. For Han Fei, this was a trial from his sect, a trial from the Void Temple. The two concepts could not be mentioned in the same breath. The key point of this trial is comprehension. In other words, if I want to pass this level perfectly, I have to wake up on my own first. F***ck, if only old Yuan was here. Han Fei's face was dark. After a while, he had retreated more than 300 meters. The power of the sword chi was getting stronger and stronger. Han Fei held the torch in one hand while retreating. Han Fei murmured, "This sword strike includes all the power that I have experienced before. It stands to reason that when so many great Daos merge together, there will definitely be conflicts. It will collapse, but why is this sword strike fine? This is indeed a sword chi that has fused many great Daos together. But in the end, it's still just a strand of sword chi. Rather than saying that many grand Daos have fused into this strand of sword chi, it would be better to say that this strand of sword chi can take the form of any grand Dao." Han Fei raised his hand and holy light appeared. However, Han Fei didn't launch an attack. He was just testing it. When the holy light was fused into the sword chi, Han Fei tried to fuse it with the law of gravity. In the end, the holy light in his hand was extinguished in an instant. That's not right. The great Daos clash. There's definitely something wrong with this wisp of sword chi that I saw. Han Fei shook his head slightly and stopped looking at the great path on the sword chi. Instead, he retreated in silence. When he retreated to about 700 meters, he saw that he would be beaten back in another 300 meters. If he still couldn't decipher this sword at the last moment, he could only forcefully shatter it. Who? At this time, Han Fei felt a gust of wind, very light. Suddenly, it occurred to Han Fei that the beginning of the third trial was to comprehend charm. Then, he just had to keep increasing the difficulty. Now, the difficulty had increased to the limit, and this wisp of sword chi was formed. Han Fei couldn't help but think, wasn't the situation when he first embarked on the invincible path similar to now? At that time, no one knew how to block a random knife attack from him. After all, they couldn't block the invincible path, nor could they avoid it. They could only force it, and the result was certain failure. Now, this wisp of sword chi was equivalent to the invincible path, which meant that he had slashed an invincible sword chi for himself. If he were someone else, he might be able to break it by force. However, the only way to really compete with the invincible path was to have a firmer Taoist heart than the invincible path at that time. Once the Taoist heart was born, the invincible path would be broken. However, thinking of this, Han Fei frowned even more tightly. His Taoist heart was strong now, but the Taoist heart itself couldn't be used as a power, could it? Wait! Suddenly, Han Fei's eyes lit up. What if it was his own Tao? Since his spiritual energy decomposition rate reached 100%, it could even be said that no one in the entire chaotic ocean could match his Taoist heart. Unless there was someone in the chaotic azure sea who had pushed the spiritual qi disassembly rate to 100%. His Taoist heart was so strong. How could he be afraid of a mere wisp of sword qi? This wisp of sword qi contained many Daos, and he had also mastered many Daos. He had a massive number of combat skills, but he couldn't break this sword? Wasn't it ridiculous? The distance he retreated had reached 800 meters. Han Fei suddenly smiled. Han Fei said, "What's the point of cultivating 1,000 great techniques? In the end, they are not as powerful as a wisp of sword qi. I might as well give them up." Han Fei suddenly stopped, slowly stretched out 2 fingers, and turned them into a sword. This sword didn't contain any Daos, but it seemed to contain a lot of Daos. This sword was simple and plain, like a child's stab, extremely slow, but also like a king's strike. When Han Fei used this sword, Zhang Luotian's eyes lit up, and he immediately shouted, "How dare you!" Bai said in surprise, "He got it? This kid actually got it on the first try." Yan Meng said, "What he got seems to be a little different. This wisp of sword qi is even more complicated than the 18 divine swords. But on the surface it looks extremely pure." The bearded man couldn't help but grin. "Impressive, impressive, no wonder he can get the inheritance of the master of the Yin-Yang Heavenly Palace. Sure enough, he does have the capital." At this moment, Han Fei gave up many Daos and thousands of combat skills. However, this simplest strike was in line with his Taoist heart. It seemed simple, but it was invincible. It seemed unpretentious, but it was sharp. However, Han Fei's Taoist heart didn't represent Han Fei's Daos. Han Fei had so many Daos, and this strike was actually a sword strike that gathered a lot of Daos. Even all the combat skills that Han Fei had learned were gathered in this sword strike. At least, in this sword strike, Han Fei forgot a lot of combat skills. At this moment, Han Fei created his own swordsmanship. Clang! With a light sound, Han Fei's fingertips seemed to be emitting the aura of a king. With one finger, there was only one belief: break the barrier with the sword. At this moment, Han Fei held the torch in his left hand, and 2 fingers of his right hand condensed into a sword and stretched out. In front of him, the wisp of sword qi that had gathered all kinds of Daos was easily defeated by the power of Han Fei's 2 fingers. The raging storm of sword qi, starting from Han Fei's 2 fingers, instantly crushed the sword qi in front of him. However, it was a pity that Han Fei didn't know how powerful the blow he launched was, because his field of vision was limited. After the power burst out, there was nothing he could do. Phew, Han Fei let out a long breath. Fortunately, at the last moment, he comprehended it. Han Fei couldn't help but look down at his 2 fingers. At that moment, Han Fei felt that his blow was very strong, stronger than the sacrificing punch and the draw technique. In terms of explosive power, it was stronger than these 2 great techniques, which meant that this was a supreme technique that could allow him to fight across realms. Han Fei couldn't help but sigh slightly. Unfortunately, I only comprehended this move. If I can comprehend another one, who can defeat me? Puff. Outside, someone couldn't help but say, "What is this kid thinking? Does he want to comprehend another set of such a great technique? If it weren't for the inspiration of these 18 divine swords, even if he became a king, he wouldn't be able to comprehend this move." Zhang Luotian said, "Okay. Comprehending in half a day, my martial emperor city's record has been broken. What's there to brag about?" At this moment the corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly, and he couldn't help but say, "Zhang Xuanyu, look, only you can create your own combat skill, right? When I go back, I'll show you off." Han Fei licked the corner of his mouth. What should I call such a powerful blow? Well, This great technique is based on the Taoist heart and is obtained by abandoning and forgetting many combat skills. Hey, did that old man Ren Tianfei come up with the sacrificing punch in this way? No, I can't learn from this old man. I have to give it a famous name. This is a sword of Taoist aura. At the moment when the sword is out, the Taoist aura is restrained. Let's call it one-finger Tao sword? No, it's too weak. This is clearly the fusion of many Taos. The unification of Taos. This name is not bad. Let's call it that. Han Fei couldn't help but grin. The unification of Taos. This was the first time in his life that he had created a combat skill by himself. Moreover, it was a super technique that was comparable to the sacrificing punch and saber drawing. It was enough for him to brag. After breaking the 18th level, Han Fei came to the stone platform of this level and lit the stone platform with a torch. At the moment when the stone platform was lit, Han Fei sighed in his heart. This is only the 18th level, but it's already so difficult. If there are still the 19th and 20th levels, do I have to keep creating my own combat skills? However, when the torch was lit, Han Fei's eyes suddenly lit up. In front of Han Fei's eyes, there was no longer darkness, but a vast expanse of whiteness. Han Fei saw that there were steps thousands of meters in front of him. On the steps, a huge gate stood. What was it if not the bronze gate? Gulp. Han Fei swallowed and looked back, only to see that he seemed to be tens of thousands of meters high in the sky. Behind him was the blue sky, and there were clouds and mist lingering below. Wow! Han Fei couldn't help swallowing again. Have I come to the southern heavenly gate? Seeing that there was no one here, Han Fei had already guessed that he was probably the first to come here. It was a pity that he couldn't tell Xia Xiaochan about it, however. Even if he told Xia Xiaochan, there was nothing he could do. The path that he and she were walking was not the same. Xia Xiaochan didn't have as many Daos as he did, so she was destined not to break that sword with the unification of Daos. But no matter what, Han Fei knew that Xia Xiaochan could break that sword with brute force. The previous levels couldn't stop her. Han Fei guessed right. This bronze gate should be the second half of the trial. Yan Meng said, this place tests the comprehension of the soul. I think it should be related to the soul, right? Thinking so, Han Fei stepped on the step. However, when Han Fei stood on the first step, he suddenly had a wonderful feeling. Han Fei suddenly turned around, only to gasp in shock. This part of the plot is coming to an end. I'm going back to the Yin-Yang Heavenly King within this month. Please vote for me. End of this chapter. Chapter 1848. At the moment when Han Fei turned around, he was confused. Han Fei saw that at this time, there was another version of himself standing under the steps. Han Fei's first reaction was to look at himself and quickly determine his current state. Right now, he was clearly a soul body. No wonder Yan Meng said that this third trial had two parts, a physical trial and a soul trial. It turned out that what he had just experienced was just a physical trial. Han Fei was speechless. If the physical trial was so difficult, then what about the soul trial? Of course, what Han Fei said was difficult was to pass it perfectly. If he tried to pass it by force, the difficulty of the physical trial could only be said to be okay. On the 18th level, at least 50% to 60% of the participants could be eliminated. At this moment, Han Fei walked up the steps. For the time being, he hadn't felt the test from this soul trial. Han Fei didn't know what was so good about this trial. He thought this would be a place like the ideal palace. However, when Han Fei wanted to summon his weapon, it didn't work at all. However, when Han Fei wanted to use his power, he felt that his soul had power to use, but he didn't know how to use it. This feeling was as if there was a power that was bound within this soul body, and it was unable to unleash its power. The soul could be used to fight. Han Fei's heavenly god stab, yin-yang reincarnation knife, and 100 beast soul-devouring roar could all be used as soul combat skills. Han Fei raised his hand and wanted to burst out the power of the heavenly god's stab. However, for some unknown reason, this power remained at the tip of his finger, unable to be released. It was as if it had been locked by his soul. As soon as Han Fei climbed up the 100th step, for some reason, he felt a little hot in his body. However, Han Fei knew that this was not a physical body, but a soul body. How could a soul body become hot? Looking around and seeing that there was no danger, Han Fei continued to climb up the stairs. Finally, the heat on Han Fei's body turned into a burning, stinging pain. At this time, Han Fei stopped and looked at the bronze gate. That gate seemed to be a gate towering in the sky. Looking up from the bottom, it was especially majestic. At this moment, Han Fei noticed that the snake in the T-shaped portrait on the bronze gate seemed to have a strange light in its eyes. So, this is the test? Someone else's gaze was like a divine light that suppressed his soul body. With just a gaze, he was unable to release his soul power at all. As expected, there was a reason for everything. He had only just ascended 1,000 steps, and he had already encountered such a situation. If nothing out of the ordinary happened, he would experience a different kind of feeling if he advanced another level. This seemed to be a custom in front of the bronze gate. Last time and the time before that it was all suppressive force. This time it was just a different method, and what was being suppressed was only the divine soul. Of course, no matter how dangerous the road ahead was, it couldn't stop him. Han Fei had come all the way here to pass the test of the Void Temple. Han Fei thought that he had passed the previous trials perfectly. He absolutely could not lose this round. The bronze gate was right in front of him. Although Han Fei didn't know what the so-called fourth trial was, the bronze gate was right in front of him. However, the bronze gate was right in front of him. He had to get through it. When Han Fei raised his foot and crossed the 1,000-layered barrier, he felt that his soul seemed to be burning. It was completely different from the faint tingling just now. This kind of burning was like being thrown into a sea of fire. Although it didn't cause any harm to his soul body, the feeling of pain was extremely clear. In the blink of an eye, 5 days passed. On the steps, another person suddenly appeared. If Han Fei looked back, he would definitely find that, to his surprise, the person who came was not from the Grand Purity Palace or the Wuji Heaven, nor was it the chaotic dragon taming man, but Song Kaiyuan. Speaking of which, Song Kaiyuan was well-read and had a rich reserve of knowledge. When he was going through the 18th trial, he meditated for 5 days and finally found a way to crack it. At this moment, when Song Kaiyuan appeared in front of the steps, he saw Han Fei's back at first glance. Then, he looked up and saw the majestic and breathtaking bronze door full of celestial qi. Gulp! Song Kaiyuan couldn't help but take a breath, slowly walked up to Han Fei and said, "Captain, what are you doing here? Why don't you climb?" However, when Song Kaiyuan asked this, he didn't get a response. When he turned his head, he found that Han Fei was like a piece of wood, motionless as if he didn't hear him at all. Huh! Song Kaiyuan immediately realized that something was wrong. When he looked at the steps again, he seemed to understand something. This should be a soul trial. Since Han Fei didn't respond, it meant that his soul was probably undergoing a trial. Song Kaiyuan immediately looked back, then stood next to Han Fei, and also stepped onto the step. With this step, Song Kaiyuan's heart stirred. He suddenly looked back, only to find that his body was also fixed in place. He immediately understood what was going on. Sure enough, this soul trial was a way of trial without the physical body. However, when he looked up, he didn't see Han Fei's soul body. His first reaction was not that something had happened to Han Fei, but that he couldn't see at all. The souls on this path couldn't see each other at all. As a result, the spiritual trials that everyone went through seemed to be a path that they had to complete alone. Outside, Yenming said, "When we get to the Divine Soul trial field, we can't see. However, a lot of people have been eliminated now. It's estimated that 1,000 people will enter the trial in the end. It's already very rare. Zhang Luotian said, putting Han Fei aside. The people of Taishan Heaven are really unparalleled in intelligence. Song Kaiyuan cracked the 18 divine swords, and his junior sister actually followed closely behind. Although Taishan Heaven is not good at fighting, we can't underestimate them. When Song Kaiyuan stepped on the steps, if he could see, he would definitely find that Han Fei was sitting cross-legged on the 1999 step. At this moment, above Han Fei's soul, there was a raging flame burning. This strong flame didn't burn the soul, but it destroyed the will. However, Han Fei already had the invincible heart and a firm Taoist heart. How could this trivial flame burn through him? However, what made Han Fei stop was that he saw a figure on the steps above. That figure seemed to be waiting for him. Intuition told Han Fei that if he went over in his current state, once he stepped on the 2000th step, if he fought with that person, he could only escape. He couldn't fight, which was his biggest problem now. It stood to reason that his soul also had a lot of power, but it was suppressed. In the past, Han Fei had considered using a soul body, but he only thought that there were soul combat skills to cultivate, so he could fight as a soul. However, this was not the case. At this moment, Han Fei discovered that soul combat skills were just soul combat skills. It was very likely to be a manifestation of the power of the soul with the help of the physical body. But now, without a physical body, he only had a pure soul body. Han Fei suddenly found that all his power was tied up by his soul body and couldn't burst out. Han Fei thought to himself, the first 2000th step can be cleared with my Taoist heart alone. However, these last 1,000 steps might not be so simple. At this moment, Han Fei was constantly activating his power. However, he always felt that the power was in his body, but he just couldn't use it. Half a month later, Han Fei was still trying again and again. Han Fei looked back many times and saw that there were as many as 100 people under the steps, and Xia Shaochan was among these 100 people. However, he didn't see any of their souls appearing on these steps. Han Fei guessed that ordinary people couldn't see souls. Just like Yin who often appeared in the Sky Meditation Garden, but how many people could see Yin? On this day, Han Fei was irritated and cursed in his heart. It's impossible that I can't use the power. Unless this power is fake. Han Fei thought so. But if the power was fake, why could he feel it? At this moment, Han Fei felt that not far away, on the same step, a figure appeared. The figure seemed to be suffering from immense pain. As soon as he got on the steps, he sat down on the steps, panting. Song Kaiyuan? Han Fei said in surprise, you're here? Song Kaiyuan was also taken aback and looked at Han Fei, who was sitting cross-legged but relaxed, in astonishment. Captain? It turns out that you're here? Han Fei couldn't help but look back. So, I can only see you when I come to this step? Song Kaiyuan said, yes. But, Captain, how long have you been sitting here? As soon as I came, I saw your body standing below. Han Fei immediately said in annoyance, stop talking. I've been sitting here for half a month. Song Kaiyuan was dumbfounded. Does Han Fei mean that it only took him half a day to pass the previous physical trial? However, considering Han Fei's special identity, Song Kaiyuan was speechless. After all, Han Fei was the master of the Divine Palace. Song Kaiyuan said, Captain, you don't seem to be in pain. Why are you still sitting here? Han Fei pursed his lips and said, look, there seems to be someone ahead. I have all my strength, but I can't use it. I may not be able to beat him. Song Kaiyuan stared at the steps for a long time and then asked, why can't you use your strength? Han Fei glanced sideways and said, can you use your strength? Song Kaiyuan was stunned for a while. With a wave of his hand, the phantom of the heaven-severing brush appeared. The heaven-severing brush drew in the air, and a soul sword light appeared, which stunned Han Fei. Han Fei was speechless. What did you do? First update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1849. Han Fei saw that Song Kaiyuan had so easily realized the way to attack as a soul. And he had been trying for half a month, but he had found nothing. Han Fei didn't know what to say. Seeing Han Fei's surprised look, Song Kaiyuan seemed to understand that not everyone had studied many soul techniques like him. He had even studied souls. This was the advantage of the Taishan heaven. Song Kaiyuan said, "In fact, it's not difficult to attack as a soul. Generally speaking, when the body and the soul are united, it's the soul that drives the body to complete what the heart wants. Because in our body, all the power we have is gathered. Although we can use divine soul battle skills, those are only battle skills. In fact, soul combat skills are just attaching the power of the soul to a certain normal form of energy. So, it's actually not very difficult to learn soul combat skills." Han Fei asked, "What about this pure soul state now?" However, Song Kaiyuan shook his head and said, "In fact, our current state is not a pure soul state. The pure state of the divine soul was manifested by the dark blue soul fire. Our current godly soul is not a complete godly soul. Before that, we need to figure out the concept. People don't only have souls but also spirit bodies." Han Fei's eyelids twitched and he thought to himself, "Is it similar to the difference between a yin soul and a yang soul?" Song Kaiyuan continued, "Of course, since we've separated from our physical bodies, our current form can be simply understood as a complex soul body formed from the combination of a soul body, a spirit body, and many other invisible forms. This kind of soul, because it is completely separated from the physical body, can't use any power in the physical body. However, because the soul and the physical body are closely connected, it makes you feel as if you can use the power of the physical body. In fact, in the soul state, we can only use soul power." Han Fei immediately asked, "How do we use it?" Song Kaiyuan explained, "First of all, we have to break a limitation. The soul we are in now is not necessarily in human form. It's just that we are used to existing in human form." As he spoke, he saw Song Kaiyuan turn into a ball-like body. Then, the ball turned into a merman, and even a crab in the end. When Song Kaiyuan returned to his human form, he said, "So, the way a soul body appears is not fixed. Soul bodies can also be separated." As he spoke, he saw Song Kaiyuan split into a few more groups. In fact, from one Song Kaiyuan, there were now 3 Song Kaiyuans. The 3 Song Kaiyuans said at the same time, "Don't rigidly adhere to form, don't cling to strength. A soul body was a soul body after all. It was impossible to maintain a complete soul body while also displaying a soul body's combat style. That's because the power you need to fight comes from your soul itself. Usually it was because the soul was relatively weak. Therefore, most people would not separate their souls from their bodies. If he was hunted, his soul would dissipate and his soul would be destroyed. Therefore, most people would not be willing to appear in the form of a spirit body if they could not control it at will." Song Kaiyuan's explanation made Han Fei immediately realize his problem. Previously, Han Fei regarded his soul as his body. Then, he wanted to burst out power from this body. However, this was not the case. If he wanted to burst out power, he needed to use his current soul body as the source of the burst of power. With a thought, Han Fei's body suddenly turned into a mist. In an instant, Han Fei mastered the essence of the soul body. This was similar to the body of black mist or the body of white mist. As Han Fei pointed with his hands, a piece of flesh seemed to be torn off from his body. It dimmed a little, and then a saber radiance swept out. With a thought from Han Fei, the knife light flew back and pierced into his body again. The overall power of the soul body was not weakened, but the way of combat skills was changed. Han Fei smiled and said, "So that's how it is. Song Kaiyuan, for this, the 2 million ultra-quality spiritual stones you and Mushui Cc owe me will be forgiven." Compared with the 2 million ultra-quality spiritual stones, being able to understand the true meaning of the soul body at this moment was of great help to Han Fei. Song Kaiyuan smiled and said, "This is not difficult to understand. It's just that you don't have time to comprehend the use of the power of the soul. That's why you don't understand it here. As long as someone has used it, you can basically understand it when you see it." Han Fei, however, said indifferently, "I, Han Fei, never take benefits for free. Okay, you don't seem to be relaxed. It's time for me to go to the upper floor." Song Kaiyuan was speechless. He saw the bronze gate, but he couldn't go there just because he wanted to. This was similar to the situation he encountered in the land of the King Grave. However, that time was a physical trial. This time, it was a divine soul trial. 3,000 meters corresponded to 3,000 steps, and the conditions to pass were the same. However, Han Fei took one step and walked up the step. Seeing this, Song Kaiyuan couldn't help but be envious and murmured, "In the end, he's still strong. Even his soul body is so strong. This time, will he also be able to enter the bronze gate?" Enlightened by Song Kaiyuan, Han Fei couldn't wait to climb up. Of course, Han Fei immediately passed it. In the end, this so-called soul-body trial was actually a trial of one's Taoist heart. This level was a test of one's Taoist heart. As long as one's Taoist heart was strong, the suppression of the soul body and the soul sea hell were nothing. When Han Fei came to the 2000 floor, the barrier was broken. Immediately, Han Fei felt that his soul was as hot as boiling water. It was burning before, but now it was boiling. However, compared with practicing the indestructible overlord body and being burned by the heavenly fire, this pain was nothing. Han Fei raised his head, only to see countless people standing on the step. The faces of these figures could not be seen. They were like shadows, like mist. When Han Fei appeared here, a black shadow rushed over from the nearest place, less than 100 meters away. This figure was holding a black knife shadow and rushing over. Han Fei didn't have any actual combat experience as a soul body. How could he hold back? If this figure was very strong and he slacked off, resulting in him not being able to enter the Void Temple, wouldn't he suffer a loss? Fortunately, Han Fei drew out the soul knife and slashed with the draw technique. With one blow, the figure on the opposite side directly collapsed, unable to resist Han Fei's domineering blow at all. However, even so, Han Fei still found that his soul was still slightly damaged when his soul body collided. This was like the collision of weapons. Even if there was a scratch, it was still a scratch. However, Han Fei didn't care. It wasn't the first time that his soul had been seriously damaged. This kind of minor injury was just a drizzle. When his soul body was damaged, how many venerables did he hunt and how many hardships did he go through to make up for it? Now, after a try, Han Fei found that this so-called opponent was far less powerful than he thought. Along the way, when figures rushed at him one after another, Han Fei smashed them again and again. Han Fei found that with his Taoist heart, this level of trial could only make him tired but not hurt him at all. It was as if this divine soul trial was teaching him how to use his soul to fight, how to describe the firmness of his Taoist heart. On the 2500th step, every time Han Fei took a step up, his soul body would be like a clay figurine that was about to collapse, and his feet began to break. That kind of experience was like a person walking, and one of his feet was gone. When he took another step, the other foot was gone. When a clay figurine passed through water, in the end, its body would melt. However, under his strong willpower, his lost foot was attached to Han Fei's body again. If it were an ordinary person, he would have turned into a pool of mud at this moment. In fact, when Han Fei reached more than 2,900 steps, he really turned into a pool of mud. Han Fei's soul became a pile of mud-like soul body. Every time he surged up a step, it was like a pool of mud climbing up the step. After climbing up, the mud bulged, and he barely turned into a half-human form. At this moment, there would still be figures attacking him, and the power of the attack was much stronger than at the beginning. Puff! Han Fei's soul body swung the mud, and a terrifying soul attack rushed out. When Han Fei's soul body really stepped on the 3000th step, Han Fei's Taoist heart was not shaken at all. When the soul body condensed into a human form again, Han Fei said lightly, "After all, it's just a trial of my Taoist heart. As long as my heart doesn't waver, what's there to be afraid of in this trial?" Just when Han Fei was about to move forward and push the bronze gate, suddenly, Han Fei raised his head and saw that the portrait on the bronze gate seemed to come to life. Bam! In an instant, Han Fei exploded and turned into a puddle of mud again. However, Han Fei's mind was not in a mess. He only saw that the strong man on the bronze gate with a human head and a beast body seemed to come to life. Vaguely, Han Fei heard a rumbling thunder, reflecting in his mind. All the people of the Void Temple deserve to die. Second update. Asking for votes. End of this chapter. Chapter 1850. After all, Han Fei was still conscious. Wasn't this the entrance trial of the Void Temple? Why would such a sentence appear at this point? Everyone in the Void Temple deserves to die? It sounded like the words of an enemy of the Void Temple. Could it be that he had gone to the wrong training field? At this moment, although Han Fei was in a state of explosion, his consciousness was still very clear. Han Fei sensed that a powerful force was obliterating his soul. Yes, Han Fei thought that after reaching the 3000th floor, he could enter the Bronze Gate, which basically meant that he had passed the trial of the Void Temple. But now, the situation was obviously wrong. Even though he rushed to the highest floor, he encountered such a sentence. The other party still wanted to obliterate his soul? Han Fei was in such a bad state that he couldn't even condense a human form. His body seemed to be pressed by infinite gravity, and he was as thin as a piece of paper. But this was not the point. Han Fei felt that part of his soul was slowly losing contact. This really gave Han Fei a fright. Immediately, Han Fei cursed, "I've worked so hard to get here, and you want to obliterate my soul? Don't even think about it." Han Fei frantically gathered his soul, trying to disperse the pressure on his body. However, no matter how hard Han Fei struggled, he couldn't shake the pressure at all. Even after several hours, Han Fei couldn't feel half of his soul at this moment. This meant that in a few hours at most, his entire soul would be obliterated. He would die. Damn it. Little calabash, demon purification pot, go up. However, this time, the demon purification pot didn't respond either. Han Fei was furious. He wanted to communicate with Forge the Universe, but Forge the Universe couldn't be opened. With a thought, Han Fei tried to summon the embroidery needle, but he also lost contact with it. But at this moment, in the remnant of Han Fei's soul, a machete was emitting a faint light. The Blade of Hope? Han Fei suddenly had a complicated look. When everything else was useless, there was still the Blade of Hope. As long as there was hope, the Blade of Hope would not be obliterated. Immediately, Han Fei's soul burst into laughter. As long as hope exists, this saber will not break. I'll kill, buzz, buzz. At this time, there were more than 500 people on the stairs. However, in their eyes, other than the bronze door, there was only the stairs. However, at this moment, the crowd saw that there were two pillars of light that were suffused with white halos attempting to soar into the sky from below the bronze door. At that moment, the one who was most shocked was Song Kaiyuan. As the second person to arrive here, Song Kaiyuan and Han Fei had met face to face. It was exactly because of this encounter that Song Kaiyuan realized that the movement above was very likely related to Han Fei. But where was that place? That was under the Bronze Gate, which had already crossed 3,000 steps. After parting ways with Han Fei for so long, he had only reached 2,300. Song Kaiyuan knew in his heart that this wasn't a place that humans could reach at all. Now that Han Fei had gone up, he must have gotten a great opportunity, right? Xia Xiaochan frowned. She was the 40th person to come here. As soon as she arrived here, she saw Han Fei standing here. Now, she had jumped over 2,200 steps and surpassed many people, but she hadn't met Han Fei yet. This meant that Han Fei's position was higher. Now, there was an abnormal movement above. The first person she thought of was Han Fei. However, unlike Song Kaiyuan, Xia Xiaochan felt that there was an inexplicable depression in her heart. This feeling was very bad. At this time, she gritted her teeth and hurriedly accelerated to climb up. The others, such as Wu Duoshou, Li Xinghen, Wu Hao, Song Longyu, and others, all looked solemn at this moment. As strong masters, their self-esteem didn't allow them to fall behind so much. Below, when everyone was struggling to climb up, under the bronze door, a pair of scimitars emitting blazing light supported the space several meters around Han Fei. At this moment, 99% of Han Fei's soul had been obliterated. Han Fei still had hope. At this moment, he was just trying to save himself. However, that kind of power had completely exceeded the current range that the Blade of Hope could resist. Han Fei felt that the light of the Blade of Hope was getting weaker and weaker. Han Fei knew that this was no longer a question of whether there was hope, but that this kind of power couldn't be resisted at all. Hee. Han Fei gathered the last bit of his strength and injected a wisp of his soul into the Blade of Hope. Han Fei said, "Return to the Yin-Yang heaven with a part of my memory. My body is still here. One day my incarnation will come back, take back my body, and return to the peak. Even after 1,000 years, what's there to be afraid of? Go." With a thought from Han Fei, the Blade of Hope directly sank into a deep blue color and into time. Shao Chun escaped from time and flew towards the savage deep abyss. At the moment when the Blade of Hope flew out in the martial Emperor City, a young man in a dragon-scale battle suit suddenly opened his eyes. He couldn't help looking in the direction of the Invincible Realm's inheritance, only to hear him murmur, "Escape from time? Is this something that a half-king can do?" At the moment when the Blade of Hope flew away, Han Fei really wanted to look at the steps. If only he could look at Xia Xiaochan again. In the face of death, Han Fei found that he was not afraid at all. However, he couldn't imagine where Xia Xiaochan would go after he died. "Hey, girl." Bam! After Han Fei muttered this sentence, in an instant, his soul no longer had consciousness. It was also at this moment that Xia Xiaochan, who was climbing up nervously, suddenly stopped. For some reason, tears began to flow from her eyes unconsciously. Something happened to Han Fei. Xia Xiaochan knew that something must have happened. Just at the moment when she was about to explode, suddenly, a crystal teardrop flew past her from behind. When she saw the teardrop, Xia Xiaochan's eyes suddenly lit up. There is still hope. The book says that the mermaid's tear means recovery in a desperate situation. Now, the mermaid's tear is gone, there must be hope. Xia Xiaochan couldn't help but look at the bronze gate blankly. Beep. Han Fei didn't know that the mermaid's tear left his body spontaneously. He had no consciousness now, and his soul seemed to have withered. Somehow, Han Fei felt that he seemed to be standing in darkness. "Am I dead?" In the darkness, a voice said, "How does it feel to die?" Han Fei froze for a while and said after a while, "I can still speak? Then am I dead or not?" The voice was leisurely. "I just wanted you to comprehend the Taoist heart in the process of dying. I didn't expect you to have so many treasures. Forget it, recover." Han Fei didn't know what was going on. In short, all of a sudden, Han Fei shivered. All of the souls that had lost their senses moments ago suddenly came back to him in an instant. Han Fei's soul quickly gathered. Han Fei rolled over and stood up. And beside him, there was a crystal teardrop. Han Fei's face changed drastically. The mermaid's tear? Did I really die just now? The mermaid's tear directly sank into Han Fei's soul and then disappeared. Just when Han Fei was about to curse, he heard a creak, and the bronze gate slowly opened a gap. When the dazzling white light leaked out from the gap of the gate, Han Fei immediately thought, this trial should be over. Although Han Fei didn't know what the fourth trial was. But now, Han Fei was going to walk through the gate again. His many senior brothers and senior sisters, the arrogant senior brother, the senior brother who threw out a divine artifact. I'm coming. At this moment, Han Fei felt no pressure at all. He took the lead and quickly stepped into the gate. Just at the moment when Han Fei stepped into the bronze gate, he might not know it himself, but Zhang Luotian and the others in the outside world were all shocked. Zhang Luotian's eyes widened. Has the ultimate trial started? No, the ultimate trial has been passed. As he spoke, a man in a dragon-scale battle suit appeared in front of everyone. Martial King. Martial King. Boss. It was said that he was elusive. In the chaotic ocean, the extremely mysterious city lord of the Martial Emperor City, Martial King, appeared in front of everyone at this moment. The Martial King said, the fourth trial is an epiphany between life and death. Someone has already passed it. This person is the first person in history to pass it. As the director of the Intelligence Center, Yen Meng couldn't help but ask, how do you know that the fourth trial has been passed? For tens of thousands of years, we have never seen the fourth trial. Even just now, we didn't see it open. Martial King smiled faintly. Some trials are not for everyone to see. A king is just a beginner. It's nothing. There are some things that even a king can't touch. However, since someone has passed the epiphany, then the bronze gate should naturally be opened. What? Everyone was stunned. The bronze gate was not real, and they couldn't see it now. However, hearing that the bronze gate had been opened, who wouldn't want to witness it? Martial King said, don't panic, wait a little longer. The third trial. Please vote. The Martial Emperor City is almost over. End of this chapter. Chapter 1851. The bronze gate opened a gap. Everyone who had not reached the top was inexplicably shocked. Who could be so fast? In the crowd, Wu Duoshou, Li Xinghen, and Xia Shaochan were the fastest. They came late, but they all reached the 2000th step. Among them, Wu Duoshou had already met Song Kaiyuan, and Xia Shaochan was moving forward quickly. Because of the appearance of the mermaid's tears and the opening of the bronze gate, Xia Shaochan was relieved. However, no matter what, it at least showed that there was great danger on the steps. Han Fei even used the mermaid's tears. It could be seen that the crisis there had involved life and death. Inside the gate, Han Fei was looking forward to another lecture. Last time, that eldest senior brother gave a lecture and said that he could disassemble his spiritual energy to 100%. If he could do it again, what if he could comprehend something more novel? When the world in front of him appeared, Han Fei saw the mountain he had seen before again. Han Fei was not completely sure, but he saw the waterfall. However, this time, there were not so many people listening to the lecture. There was only silence in all directions. Clatter! All of a sudden, Han Fei looked back. He saw a mountain-like finger coming from nowhere. The finger tapped in the air. Han Fei felt a clang between his eyebrows, and he was knocked to the ground by the finger. In the void, a giant shadow was sitting cross-legged on the top of the mountain, tens of thousands of meters high, which was horrifying. A gentle voice said, "The trial is for you to comprehend, not for you to bear. Comprehend the path of cultivation in the entrance of life and death. Comprehend life and death when all your hopes are gone. A mere sentence from the side has filled your heart with doubts. How can you be so firm in your Tao heart?" Gulp. Han Fei's heart did a flip. Damn, is this eldest senior brother? Eldest senior brother is really big. After listening to eldest senior brother's explanation, if Han Fei still didn't understand what was going on, he would be really stupid. That was why he had heard the words, "Anyone who enters the Void Temple deserves to die." This was just a bluff. It was to scare him and make him think that he had joined the wrong sect. Only then would he be able to properly experience the taste of death. However, this entrance trial was too King insane. Who would use death as a trial? Great, now I've arranged for the Blades of Hope to go back. The mermaid's tears couldn't escape either, but he didn't know if it was useful or not. Han Fei was a powerhouse after all. How could he not have a temper? He immediately said, "Eldest senior brother, our entrance trial is too much of a scam. I'm already very enlightened, but who would treat life and death as a trial?" "You talk back." The mountain-like finger gently pointed at Han Fei's head, and there was another clang. With one blow Han Fei's but fell to the ground and he moved dozens of meters. Of course, even though this eldest senior brother hit him, he didn't use much strength. Otherwise, even 10 of him wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of that finger. Han Fei got up quickly and then bowed respectfully to this eldest senior brother. After all, it was a very thick thigh. How many senior brothers were they talking about before? It was a divine weapon that he threw casually. I don't expect eldest senior brother to throw it magically, but it would be great if he could give me some other benefits or something. The eldest senior brother said, "Cultivators ask the heavens and seek the Tao. If the heart is confused, the will is not firm. All kinds of doubts arise from the lack of a firm heart. Forget it, although you haven't comprehended life and death, you've endured it. You've gained something. You'll be considered to have passed this trial." Han Fei's heart trembled, and he raised his head unconsciously. Han Fei clasped his hands and said, "Thank you, eldest senior brother." "Well, eldest senior brother, can you tell me something about our Void Temple? Last time, we didn't even say a few words before everyone left. This time, can you at least tell me something?" However, the gentle voice seemed to be whispering in the sky, "You'll know when you should know." Han Fei rolled his eyes. "Then, eldest senior brother, I've finally passed the trial. Please give me some pointers on my shortcomings in this trial. The place where I'm at is barren, scarce resources, and withered cultivation methods. In some of the trials, I barely made a breakthrough after trying my best." Han Fei had made up his mind. "If you don't tell me about the Void Temple, you should at least give me something I want, right? Last time, that senior brother hit me with a divine weapon as soon as he came up. Even if you don't give me a divine weapon, at least give me a spiritual treasure." There was no telling if this senior brother was easy to talk to, but he said without hesitation, "Although you haven't joined the sect yet, if you don't die, you can be regarded as a disciple of the Void Temple. I have 3 arts, all of which are entry-level divine arts. You can choose one of them." Hearing this, Han Fei immediately said, "Can't I choose all of them?" "Shut up. Bada." Without any suspense, Han Fei was hit on the head again and fell to the ground. Han Fei said awkwardly, "Fine, I'll choose one. Eldest senior brother, what are the 3 arts?" 3 golden pages appeared in the void, and the eldest senior brother's voice sounded. "One art is called the Void Sky Observation Technique, which can refine the soul and help you perceive the sky. The vast sea race is ranked 11th in the expansion sea realm. The second art is called the Void Mortal Refinement Art. It helps to cultivate the physical body. It can be used to refine the body in the void and forge a supreme body. The vast sea race is ranked 8th. The 3 techniques are called the Void Flame Refining Technique, which is a technique to control fire and refine weapons. It can be used to cultivate the divine soul and the physical body, and it can also be used to control fire and refine weapons. Ranked 100th among the myriad races in the vast sea. Eldest brother said slowly, "You can choose one, but don't be too greedy." Gulp. Han Fei couldn't help but drool. He had the stainless profound body, and was ranked 998 in the sea expansion realm. As a result, the Void Temple had randomly chosen someone who had reached the 8th rank of sea expansion. That was the list of the 10,000 races in the vast sea. That was one of the most powerful cultivation arts in the world. Han Fei was stunned when he heard the eldest senior brother's introduction. With this technique in hand, the world was mine. Once he succeeded, he would sweep across the chaotic azure sea. What else was there to say? And that void heaven observing technique? Motherf asterisk Ker, this is incredible. It could be said that this was the end of visualization. Cultivating this technique, not to mention anything else, from now on, the strength of his soul wouldn't be lacking. However, these two great techniques were ranked extremely high, but their abilities were too singular. However, the art of refining flame in the void was different. Although the ranking was a little low, it was still ranked 100th. Compared to his own Nirmala body, this was 18 levels better. Han Fei's chest rose and fell, and he said, "Eldest senior brother, if I become a disciple of the Void Temple someday, I'll become a disciple of the Void Temple. Can I learn all of these great techniques?" Eldest senior brother became a man of few words at this moment. His voice was ethereal as he said, "Yes." Han Fei swallowed. "Senior brother, I choose the void fire refining technique." It wasn't that Han Fei didn't want to get a better one, but because in a place like the chaotic azure sea, the upper limit of his cultivation method was only about 10,000. For example, the chaotic vital body was already the upper limit of the chaotic vast ocean. Compared to his untainted Xian body, it was much weaker. Now, with this void fire refining technique, he could directly reach the ceiling of the chaotic vast ocean. As long as he was given some time and space to develop, who could resist the chaotic vast ocean? However, Han Fei also keenly discovered one thing, that was, all the great techniques of the Void Temple began with the word void. This made him wonder where the void fishing technique came from. So, Han Fei asked again, "Eldest senior brother, is the void fishing technique a technique of our Void Temple?" Eldest senior brother's voice was ethereal. "Yes." Eldest senior brother didn't seem to want to talk too much with Han Fei. He said, "On the path of cultivation, although it's good to work hard, it's more important to understand. All the principles of heaven and earth, the universe, and the laws of heaven and earth are all in a single thought. Little junior brother, work hard." As soon as he saw eldest senior brother's figure begin to disappear, Han Fei hurriedly shouted, "Eldest senior brother, then where will my next trial be?" The huge figure disappeared without a trace. In the void there were only echoes left, and the voice said, "It's up to fate. Just be patient." Eldest senior brother left, but a golden page in the void turned into golden rays of light and rushed directly into the center of Han Fei's eyebrows. Han Fei seemed to have lost contact with the demon purification pot here. So, Han Fei couldn't see what this great technique looked like. However, the next moment, Han Fei only felt that his eyes were covered by fog. Immediately afterward, Han Fei opened his eyes again and found that he had appeared on the field outside the martial Emperor city. At the moment when Han Fei appeared, a star bead appeared in front of him. It was the 10-star bead that Han Fei got in the first test. However, at this moment the content of this star bead had changed. It was written on it, "Trial completion, 99%. Why was it 99%? Han Fei guessed that there was a reason. That was, he didn't pass the last test by himself, but by passing it. Han Fei glanced around. At this moment, he was alone in the field of the martial Emperor city. Of course, in addition to him, there were also 8 dumbfounded half-king powerhouses and a young man wearing a dragon-scale battlesuit. Chapter 1852. The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. Wasn't this too high-profile? It was said that as long as the trial score was above 95%, one could get the real martial emperor's inheritance. Han Fei didn't know what the so-called invincible inheritance was. However, he had obtained the great technique of the Void Temple. Besides, the one with the best trial score could also get 3 opportunities from the martial Emperor city. This gift was incredible. It was equivalent to the martial Emperor city owing Han Fei 3 favors. Han Fei immediately put away his surprised expression and slightly cupped his hands at the kings. "Greetings, kings. I'm lucky to win this trial." Yan Meng said, "The trial is not over yet." However, everyone knew that Yan Meng's words were meaningless. Throughout history, no one had ever gotten above 95% in the trial of the martial emperor's inheritance. Han Fei was the first one. How could he meet a second one so easily? However, no matter what, Han Fei could inherit the martial emperor's inheritance. At this moment, the man in the dragon scale armor glanced at Han Fei and said, "Since your completion rate of the trial has reached 95%, come with me. Get ready to accept the martial emperor's inheritance." Han Fei was slightly stunned and then said, "Don't I have to wait until the trial is over?" Before the man spoke, Yan Meng said, "If Xia Shaochan comes out in advance, we will inform her. Of course, you can also wait until the trial is over to accept the martial emperor's inheritance. However, there are still 7 days before the trial is over. If you don't mind wasting time, you can also wait." Han Fei thought for a moment. Since there was a trial of the martial emperor's inheritance in the martial emperor city, the martial emperor should have something to do with the Void Temple. However, he had to be wary of others. In Forge the Universe, Han Fei secretly operated the 9-Palace Fate Ruler. When the ruler fell on the hexagram of Great Fortune, he was relieved. Han Fei slightly cupped his hands. "Then I'll do as you say." Therefore, the things that eldest senior brother had given him were purely the benefits that eldest senior brother had given him. And the martial emperor's inheritance was the martial emperor's inheritance. The two didn't conflict. Seeing that there were still 7 days left, Han Fei thought, maybe I can still come back after I accept the martial emperor's inheritance. At this moment, King Wu glanced at Han Fei and said, "Come with me." With a stomp, a complicated formation appeared in the air. As King Wu entered, Han Fei's vision suddenly changed, and he came to a high tower. If Han Fei remembered correctly, this should be the cultivation tower of the martial emperor city. Previously, when he learned about the martial emperor city, he heard that there were some places in the cultivation tower that were not open to the public. However, with so many experts in martial emperor city, how could they not see the two of them appearing so openly? The martial king said, "This is not the cultivation tower, but the other side of martial emperor city. You can think of it as a mirror world." Mirror world? King Wu said indifferently, "In martial emperor city, only those in the sea expansion realm know of the existence of this world. However, this is only a cultivation ground that I created. It doesn't have any special meaning." Han Fei raised his eyebrows. Was this space created by this man? To be able to open up such a large world, one that was not even in the origin sea, and to be able to bring living people in? Who the hell was this guy? King Wu turned his head, glanced at Han Fei and said leisurely, "The last person to accept the martial emperor's inheritance was me. After 80,000 years there is finally another one. I hope that the martial emperor's inheritance will be of greater use to you." Han Fei was shocked. This person had obtained the martial emperor's inheritance? In other words, this person had challenged the trial of the martial emperor's inheritance and achieved a score of more than 95%? Basically, this person had at least walked to the Bronze Gate. As for whether he had entered the Bronze Gate, Han Fei didn't know. He said, "Let's go. The place of inheritance is in the secret realm." After that, King Wu took Han Fei into the tower. In the center of the room on the top floor there was an array. Han Fei and King Wu stood on the array. With a flash of light, the two appeared in a place that looked like a cave. However, this cave was extremely vast and high. When Han Fei arrived here, he was attracted by a huge statue at first glance. This statue was sitting cross-legged on the ground. Even so, its height reached more than 3,000 meters. Standing in front of the statue, Han Fei was as small as an ant. The point was that this statue gave Han Fei the same feeling that his eldest senior brother gave him. Oh no, his eldest senior brother was much larger than this statue. The Martial King said, "In this world, there is a strange technique called the Dharma body. The so-called Dharma body is a body of laws and principles condensed by the power of the Tao of Heaven. It contains the power of law enforcement, rules, and the Great Way. It is an extremely powerful soul technique. To understand it intuitively, you can think of it as a special combat form, external incarnation, or even a kind of technique." Han Fei's eyelids twitched a few times. Soul technique? Dharma body? King Wu said, "Let me show you once." Han Fei looked at King Wu, only to see a mysterious light burst out of his body. Then, in the void behind him, a giant with a height of 100 meters suddenly appeared. The giant's face was blurred. Its limbs and body were no different from that of a human, very much like the phantom of the god of war that Han Fei had seen before. However, the phantom of the god of war was not so big, and it was just a phantom. This Dharma body looked awesome. Han Fei felt the terrifying power of the Dharma body. Even now, his strength could be said to be the strongest among the half-kings. However, when he saw this Dharma body, he also felt that an extremely heavy burden was on his shoulders. It seemed that as long as this Dharma body pressed down, he could be crushed to the ground. The Dharma body said, "The so-called soul technique, you can understand it as the soul battle technique. The fundamental power of the Dharma body comes from the power of the soul. The soul formation is regarded as the Dharma body. The Dharma body sits in the soul sea, and ordinary soul attacks can hardly shake it. And the fighting time of the Dharma body depends entirely on the strength of your soul. The characteristics of the Dharma body mainly inherit your own characteristic." After that, the Dharma body behind King Wu dissipated, turning into a phantom bit by bit. Han Fei was stunned. "Oh my god, this is definitely a super great technique." Before this, Han Fei had never heard of the existence of a Dharma body in this world. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "Senior, how is the combat power of the Dharma body?" King Wu said lightly, "The strength of the Dharma body is related to your own strength. It represents the strength of your soul. It will not be ridiculously higher than your own strength, but it is still possible to be 50% or several times stronger." Hearing this, Han Fei's heart did a flip. Just now, that Dharma body stood in front of him. That sense of oppression almost made him unable to bear it. This person said that the strength of the Dharma body and the Dharma body were not very different. Didn't it mean that this person was very strong and could definitely be ranked in the top 10 of the Pioneer Sea realm in the entire chaotic ocean? Or Han Fei had a faint suspicion in his heart. Could this person be King Wu? At this moment, King Wu pointed to the huge statue and said, "Back then, I didn't completely pass the trial, so I wasn't an official disciple of the Void Temple. At most, I was just a nominal disciple. Although I couldn't become a member, I had to continue this trial and wait for new people to appear." At that moment, Han Fei shivered. Han Fei looked at this person in astonishment. This person knew about the Void Temple? And he was a nominal disciple? Gulp. Han Fei was sure of his guess. The strongest person in the martial Emperor City, the mysterious King Wu, turned out to be a nominal disciple of the Void Temple? King Wu said lightly, "Don't be surprised. Everyone has their own destiny. My destiny ended here, but you started it here." Han Fei couldn't help but say, "Senior King Wu, who can defeat you in the chaotic ocean? You still can't enter the Void Temple?" King Wu smiled slightly. "You don't understand. If you can't pass the trial, you can't become a real disciple. This time, if you can't enter the Bronze Gate, you will be the same as me. The gate of the Void Temple will not open for you again." Hiss! Han Fei took a slight breath. "Damn, this entrance trial is too King strict, isn't it?" King Wu said, "Accept the inheritance. I'm leaving." The martial king disappeared, leaving Han Fei alone to stare at the towering giant stone statue. He stared blankly for a while, then walked straight to the front of the stone statue, onto a round platform that was emitting a dense light. As soon as Han Fei stood on this round platform, suddenly, a golden light rushed directly into Han Fei's mind from above. Boom! Han Fei's mind was abnormally clear. The power of his soul gathered crazily, and finally condensed into a golden little man, which appeared in his mind. The little man emitted a brilliant golden light. When the golden light stopped, some heavenly words popped up in Han Fei's mind. In the end, the information presented in front of Han Fei's eyes was as follows: Firmament Martial Divine Body, Ungraded, Introduction. This technique is also known as the Firmament Dharma Body, a cultivation method for divine fetuses. The Dharma Body lives and perishes with the Master. The power of the Dharma Body comes from the realm of the Master, the main path of cultivation, the strength of the soul, the firmness of the mind, and the understanding of the great Tao. Firmament Martial Divine Body, ranked 108th in the Pioneer C realm. Deduced Art. Void Dharma Body Deduction Consumption, 100,000 strands of chaotic gas. Note: the stronger the mind, the stronger the Dharma Body. Chapter 1853. Firmament Martial Divine Body? Han Fei thought to himself, just from the name, I know it's not ordinary. Sure enough, this seemed to be the ceiling of the Dharma Body world. This level was clearly comparable to the void fire refining technique that he wanted. There were tens of thousands of clans in the vast sea, and tens of millions of families. This time, he had finally made a name for himself. However, when Han Fei saw that it would cost 100,000 strands of chaotic energy to deduce it, he didn't feel good. Damn it, who the hell are you kidding? Even if the demon purification pot upgraded the time chain, it would only cost 10,000 strands of chaotic energy now. This thing costs 100,000 strands at once? If I have that resource, I'll upgrade the time chain as soon as possible. He didn't care about this. Han Fei closed his eyes and quickly studied this martial divine body. Then, Han Fei looked at the golden little man in his mind several times. Han Fei tried to use the power of the golden little man, and then he saw an invisible giant more than 50 meters tall appear behind him. This martial divine body, the Dharma body, was no longer the giant transformed by the invincible golden body. Han Fei's Dharma body looked like a brawny Buddha. The murderous aura on his body condensed, and his blood was surging. The moment this Dharma body appeared, Han Fei felt that he could control the Dharma body and his own body at the same time. What was different was that the Dharmakaya he sensed was a figure with an extremely strong physique and an extremely fierce nature. In terms of appearance, it looked very similar to King Wu's Dharma body. However, for some reason, Han Fei always felt that his Dharma body seemed to be very ferocious. Han Fei's Dharma body was clenching his fists, feeling the surge of energy in his body, the circulation of Taoist aura, and the mobilization of soul power. To put it bluntly, if someone were to attack him with an ordinary soul attack, he would only need a single slap to destroy that person's soul. With a thought from Han Fei, the Dharma body dissipated. Phew! A Dharma body, a kind of magical Dharma body that appears by relying on inheritance. I wonder who its original form is? Han Fei knew. Should he study the original form of this so-called Dharma body now? It was too early. It was just that the process of this inheritance was a little too simple. Just one beam of light and he had obtained the Dharmakaya cultivation method? Han Fei stared at the huge statue for a long time but failed to form any great technique in his mind. Han Fei was sure that it was probably because the difficulty of the trial was too high. Therefore, when accepting the inheritance, there was no difficulty at all. It was just a beam of light. Han Fei looked back but didn't leave immediately. In Han Fei's eyes, another piece of information emerged. Void fire-making technique, unrated, introduction. The art of refining by controlling fire can support the cultivation of the soul, the cultivation of the physical body, and the art of refining by controlling fire. To cultivate this technique, one would need to enter the void realm and master the void flame. When cultivating, one's mind and spirit must be one, and one's strength must be exhausted in order to succeed. Deduction, not deductible effect. Controlling fire to forge weapons is also a time to refine one's spirit and body. Note: to practice this technique, one needs an extremely strong physique and soul. Han Fei didn't have a chance to read the void fire refining technique carefully before. Now that he was free and had time, he decided to come and take a look. However, the more Han Fei read, the more profound he felt it was. This great technique had a detailed explanation of the void realm and the void flame. It didn't seem to be something that he could study in a short time. Now, what he lacked the most was time. He'd better wait until he returned to the Yin-Yang heaven to study it. After a while, when Han Fei confirmed again and again that there was nothing else in the martial emperor's inheritance, he reluctantly left this place. Although Han Fei had left, the martial emperor's inheritance was probably still there. When Han Fei reappeared on the top of the tower, the martial emperor was waiting for him. Seeing Han Fei come out, he said, "The inheritance is a Dharma body. But I think the better thing should be inside the bronze gate. Now you have obtained the Dharma body and left the gate. It can be said that as long as you become a king smoothly and steadily, your achievements in the future will only be higher than mine." Han Fei said, "The trial of the Void Temple is not over yet. I am not a disciple yet." King Wu couldn't help but look at Han Fei. "You entered 2 bronze gates in a row and you are not a disciple yet?" King Wu might have entered the bronze gate once, but obviously, he failed the second time. Because he couldn't enter it, he didn't know if there were other bronze gates behind it. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it before. However, the Martial Emperor City's intelligence network was the best in the chaotic ocean. He didn't even know about the existence of the bronze gates. Therefore, he only thought that only by passing the trial of the Martial Emperor's inheritance and entering the bronze gate could he be considered to have passed the trial of the Void Temple. Hearing that Han Fei was not a disciple yet, King Wu immediately laughed. As I expected, King Wu was certain of his thoughts. All these years, he had been thinking about the 3 divine halls. In the chaotic ocean, there were extremely few people who knew about the 3 divine halls. However, it didn't mean that there were no traces. King Wu's original intention of building the Martial Emperor City was to collect intelligence from the world. Who knew that he didn't get the information he wanted, but the Martial Emperor City became stronger and became almost the most powerful force in the chaotic ocean. The Martial King said, "You've obtained the Martial Emperor's inheritance. If there are no accidents, you should be the most outstanding person here." A 99% completion rate had never been achieved before. However, the help that Martial Emperor City can give you is limited to 3 things. This help is to form ties with you. But don't think too much about it. Forming ties is not about flattery. Don't say that you haven't grown up yet. Even if you're already at the sea expansion realm, you're not worth the Martial Emperor City fawning over. Do you know how I established Martial Emperor City? Han Fei slightly shook his head. What do you think? King Wu narrowed his eyes. Although I wasn't able to join the Void Temple, I received a gift from a martial emperor. If you enter the Void Temple, you should have the opportunity to come into contact with martial emperors. The Martial Emperor City was a place of protection for the martial emperor. Because of the existence of martial monarchs, some special forces from the outside world could descend into the chaotic vast sea using some special methods, but no one dared to act recklessly. This is the deterrence of a venerable sovereign. Han Fei's heart skipped a beat. It turned out that the Martial Emperor City really had a connection with venerable sovereign. With the protection of a venerable sovereign, It was no wonder that the martial emperor city could easily suppress the chaotic vast sea. Of course, the strength of this King Wu couldn't be weak. Someone who could call himself King Wu and guard the martial emperor city was definitely an expert in the heaven-opening state. Otherwise, who in the Mermaids, the Grand Purity Palace, and the 100 Demons clan could tolerate a mere king suppressing the entire chaotic vast sea? Han Fei didn't try to guess the strength of this King Wu. He was still in the critical period of his growth. Only after he successfully expanded his sea and became a real king could he be qualified to fight for a place in the chaotic vast sea. For now, although he had treasures all over his body and countless opportunities, he was not a king after all. There was nothing he could do when he encountered an expert like Chun Huangdian. Han Fei immediately said, "I, Han Fei, am not an ungrateful person who burns bridges after crossing the river. This time, I've obtained an opportunity in the martial emperor city. If I have a chance in the future, I will certainly repay it. As for the 3 wishes of the martial emperor city, I hope that the first wish is to escort me into the abyssal chasm." Before Han Fei came, he never thought that he would eventually leave the chaotic vast sea in such a way. Before he came, Han Fei was ready to drag Chun Huangdian into this mess. As for whether he could drag him into this mess? How long could he drag him into this mess? Han Fei would try his best. Han Fei even had a backup plan, but it was probably unnecessary now. King Wu slightly nodded. "Yan Meng told me. You don't need to worry about Chun Huangdian." Han Fei heaved a sigh of relief. He wasn't scared of Chun Huangdian, who was a king, but he was scared that Chun Huangdian had concealed his level. Xia Xiaochan didn't lie to Yan Meng about that. She was really suspicious. Han Fei could still escape from a pioneer sea cultivator after all. But if he was really a pioneer sea cultivator, he could only rely on luck. Seeing that everything was settled, Han Fei said, "Senior King Wu, the second thing." Han Fei returned to the wilderness in the mountains, only to find that 3 days had passed. It meant that 3 days had passed the moment he accepted the inheritance. After the 8 kings saw Han Fei return, someone couldn't help but exclaim, "I really envy this kid. The martial emperor's inheritance. This kid is the second to receive the martial emperor's inheritance after King Wu. I wonder what it is? Yan Meng, you are the director of the intelligence center. Can you tell us?" Yan Meng rolled her eyes at that person and said, "In your dreams." Another 4 days passed. Han Fei was meditating cross-legged. He couldn't enter Forge the Universe under the nose of these kings, so he just kept practicing. Suddenly, with a whoosh, a person appeared. Han Fei thought that the second one to come out would be Xia Xiaochan. Because Xia Xiaochan's special bloodline and background were extremely powerful. However, the second one to come out was Antique Wu. Han Fei was stunned. Is this unrivaled really so strong? However, he wondered what the completion rate of this unrivaled star bead was. At this moment, Antique Wu's pupils constricted the moment he saw Han Fei. This guy came out before him? While Han Fei was thinking, he heard Yan Meng say, "Antique Wu of the Grand Purity Palace, trial completion rate, 89%. Hearing Antique Wu's result, Han Fei was immediately reassured. It seemed that coming out early didn't necessarily mean a good result. At this moment, Antique Wu couldn't help but look at Han Fei, but he didn't ask about Han Fei's completion rate. Just like Han Fei, he also sat down cross-legged. Half an hour later. This time, it was Sword Regret who came out. Han Fei was stunned. Even a smart person like Song Kaiyuan hadn't come out yet, but Sword Regret had actually reached the 3000th floor? Yan Meng said, "Sword Regret of the Sword God Palace, trial completion rate, 92%. At that moment, Antique Wu almost exploded. He glanced at Sword Regret and thought, how can such a thing have a higher completion rate than me? 2 hours later. Swish. Li Xinghen appeared on the plain with a pale face. When he saw the star bead in his hand, his face became even more gloomy. Yan Meng said, Li Xinghen, trial completion rate, 88%. Then, more and more people came out. Martial Emperor City, Yi Fan, trial completion rate, 91%. Merman Royal Family, Yu Lai, trial completion rate, 90%. Chaos Heavens, Wu Hao, trial completion rate, 88%. Xia Xiaochan was the 9th to come out. The moment Xia Xiaochan appeared on the plain, Han Fei suddenly stood up. The moment Xia Xiaochan saw Han Fei, she burst into tears and plunged into Han Fei's arms, crying and laughing. Han Fei was dumbfounded and quickly comforted her. "Don't cry. What's wrong? Did you comprehend something in the final trial?" Xia Xiaochan wiped her tears. "I'm not telling you." At this moment, Yan Meng said, "Merman Royal Family, Xia Xiaochan, trial completion rate, 94%. Chapter 1854. When Xia Xiaochan's 94% completion rate appeared, everyone's eyes were fixed on her. Even Yu Lai couldn't help but frown. She was only 1% away. Just 1% away from accepting the Martial Emperor's inheritance trial in the Martial Emperor City. However, some people breathed a sigh of relief and thought, fortunately, Xia Xiaochan didn't accept the inheritance. Otherwise, if the mermaids become as powerful as the Martial Emperor City in the future, what would happen? At this moment, Xia Xiaochan glanced at Han Fei. Han Fei instantly understood and immediately showed Xia Xiaochan his star bead. After seeing the star bead, Xia Xiaochan's eyes widened and then she said via voice transmission, "How could you get such a high score in such a perverted trial?" After getting such a high score, Xia Xiaochan also understood why Han Fei activated the mermaid's tears at that time. That was facing death. Or in other words, at that moment, Han Fei died. She was crying and laughing just now because she also experienced this scene. But unfortunately, she lost the Martial Emperor's inheritance with only 1% of the completion rate. At this moment, there was a voice in Han Fei's mind. This voice came from King Wu. He said, "Don't try to pass your body to others. Everyone's opportunity is different. You were the one who received the inheritance, but now you can't take the initiative to pass it on. If you try it rashly, you will be swallowed by it." Han Fei nodded slightly, then rubbed Xia Xiaochan's head and said, "Finally, you made it. Let's talk when we get back." Xia Xiaochan certainly knew that this was not a good place to talk, so she didn't ask any more. Another 6 hours passed. There were 12 people in total, including Han Fei. Among them, there were Yu Lai and Xia Xiaochan from the Mermaid Clan, Wu Qing from the Grand Purity Palace, Li Xinghen from the Wuji Heaven, Song Kaiyuan from the Taixin Heaven, Yi Fan, Zhang Heng, and Zheng Shuang from the Martial Emperor City. After all 12 people came out, another 6 hours passed. Yan Meng said, "This trial is over. Everyone, return to your positions." Swish, swish, swish on this field, more than 6,000 people all appeared. When the main force appeared, cries of distress could be heard all over the place. Someone sighed. "It's too difficult. Such a trial isn't something a human can pass." A tortoise from the 100 demon race said, "It's a pity that I'm stuck at the 18th trial, I can't pass it." Someone shook his head. The first 18 trials are easy to deal with. The 3,000 steps at the back were not something a human could climb. After climbing more than 800 floors, I was finally exhausted. My senior martial brother is almost at the top. Someone heaved a long sigh. I've already touched the threshold of the 2000th floor. Unfortunately, my soul is scattered and I can't advance any further. One of the fish heads sighed. I suspect that no one can reach the top at all. How can this completion rate be so low? Everyone looked at the star beads in their hands, only to see that some of them were more than 60%, some were more than 50%, and most of them were about 70%. It could be said that those above 80% were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Silence. Yan Meng scolded, "Don't make any noise. This king will now publicly announce the top 10 results of this trial. Yan Meng's words silenced the crowd. Everyone pricked up their ears. They were also curious. Who was the person with the highest score this time? Yan Meng's old-fashioned personality was very similar to Luo Xiaobai's. If it were an ordinary person, they might have broadcasted the results backwards. However, Yan Meng was not like this. She said, "Yinyang Heaven, Han Fei, trial completion rate, 99%. Wow! What? F***CK. I scared the tortoises. So high, how could he be so high? Did he cheat?" On the Taishan Heaven's side, Mu Shuacc exclaimed, "Oh my God! So high. He's 15% higher than me. Is he still human?" Lu Ran and Mu Shi of the glass sky were dumbfounded. Mu Shi's face was red. She couldn't help but think of the saying, "Once you put on a mask, no one will love you." Although she was annoyed, this guy was really strong. On the snow god's temple's side, Bingxue Chuling had a complicated expression. She knew that Han Fei was the master of the divine palace, and was by no means comparable to ordinary people. However, this was too high, wasn't it? It was said that no one had been able to complete more than 95% of the martial emperor's inheritance in the past 80,000 years. On the witch pirate's side, Long Wu and Pearl looked at each other. At this moment, the two of them had thousands of words in their hearts. But this was not the place to talk. So, they kept it all in their hearts. However, Long Wu blinked as if asking, "Is this the one we've been looking for? Is this the meaning of the witch pirate's existence? Is this the power and horror of the Yinyang Heaven?" Off the field, there was an uproar. More than 6,000 people looked at Han Fei. However, Han Fei didn't feel like he was being pushed into the teeth of the storm. He didn't care that he was a tall tree. At least, for now, the martial Emperor City was responsible. At least, before he returned to the chaotic Azure Sea, no one could touch him. As for the future? Even if someone really wanted to deal with him, it was definitely not these venerables in front of him. Some people were surprised, and naturally some people had complicated feelings, even resentful. Suddenly, they heard Vice Leader Wu cupped his hands and said, "Senior Yan Meng, the 4th level has not yet begun. Why can Han Fei complete 99%? Many people fell silent, thinking, "That's right. The 4th test hasn't begun yet, has it?" Yan Meng said, "The 4th test is called the Life and Death Hidden Latch, which you can only experience after the 3rd test. A total of 13 people made it to the 4th test, but only Han Fei passed. As for the rest, you must have experienced it, so I don't need to say more, right?" These more than 6,000 people were dumbfounded. It seemed that out of more than 6,000 people, a total of 13 people entered the 4th test? And in the 4th test, only one person completed the test? At this time, the way everyone looked at Han Fei changed. They were amazed that no one, whether it was the Grand Purity Palace, the Wuji Heaven, the mermaids or the 100 demons, could catch up with Han Fei's results. Yan Meng continued to broadcast. Mermaid Royal Family, Xia Xiaochan, completion of the trial, 94%. Taishan Heaven, Song Kaiyuan, completion of the trial, 94%. Wu Emperor City, Yi Fan, completion of the trial, 91%. Although Yan Meng was broadcasting, the true experts could no longer bear to listen. In the world of cultivators, people couldn't remember who was 2nd or 3rd. Because if they weren't number 1, they wouldn't have any opportunities. Even if the 2nd place was the princess of the Merfolk royal family, it would still be the same. Under the halo of Han Fei's 1st place, everyone else was eclipsed. To put it bluntly, the entire chaotic vast ocean would remember Han Fei's name in this martial emperor trial. He was the first person in history to complete the trial of the martial emperor's inheritance. At this moment, Zhang Luotian said, "Although the rest didn't obtain any great fortuitous encounters, they still managed to obtain a great fortune. However, this trial in itself was a rare opportunity. The more you can comprehend, the more you will gain. I'm sure all of you already have an idea. If that's the case, I hereby announce that the trial of the Martial Emperor's inheritance has come to an end. Please help yourselves. The Martial Emperor City's attitude was just that, arrogant and unyielding. Since he didn't get any fortuitous encounter, he should just go and do what he wanted to do. At this moment, Han Fei took Xia Xiaochan's hand and said, "Let's go." Since he was in a good mood today, he decided to go shopping. I can't just come here and go back without buying anything. Xia Xiaochan was puzzled. Haven't we already bought a lot? Besides, what about the Martial Emperor's inheritance? Han Fei said, "It's been passed down." Xia Xiaochan asked, "When?" Han Fei said, "A few days ago." Xia Xiaochan. After the 8 kings left, all the attention was gone. Only then did old Yuan's voice appear in Han Fei's mind. He said, "There is an emperor in this Martial Emperor City." Han Fei was speechless. "By the time you told me, it would have been too late." The old turtle said, "More than one. Especially the person you met after you came out. Even if I was still here, I might not be a match for him." The old turtle should be talking about the Martial King. Han Fei knew that the Martial King was powerful, but he didn't expect it to be so powerful. Even though it was very likely that the old turtle was a monarch realm scoundrel, it had lived for a very long time. Moreover, the old turtle lived through the era when the gods fell, which was not something that ordinary people could do. It could be seen that even if the old turtle was a punk, he was an extremely strong punk. However, this made sense. Otherwise, how could the Martial King suppress the chaotic ocean? How could the Martial Emperor City become such a special place? On this side, as soon as the trial of the inheritance of the invincible realm was over, the kings of the major forces had already received the news. The kings of the Taishan Heaven and the Glass Heaven were gathered at this moment. This time, Feng Xinlan came from the Glass Heaven. She looked solemn. She didn't expect Han Fei's strength and luck to be so profound. The little uncle thief of the Taishan Heaven said lightly, "Senior brother, you really have a keen eye. Compared with senior brother, my eyes are still a little worse." A powerhouse of the Sword God Palace said, "When the great era comes, one person rises and gathers all the luck, then everyone will follow him, and it will be easy for him to ascend to heaven. Now let's see how far he can go." On the side of the Wuji Heaven, Bei Xianbing narrowed her eyes. Han Fei from the Yinyang Heaven. If we don't get rid of him, I'm afraid he will become a big problem. On the side of Chun Huangdian, he was standing on a high cliff and looking at the sea. He looked indifferent and murmured, "I underestimated this kid." Chapter 1855. While wandering, Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan's first stop was the bookstore in the Martial Emperor City. Along the way, Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan turned their heads around 100%. Anyone who could be in the Martial Emperor City would pay attention to the Martial Emperor's inheritance trial. Han Fei ranked first in the trial, and became the first and only person to complete the Martial Emperor's inheritance trial in 80,000 years. The news spread like wildfire in no time. Even many sea demons, seabed humans, and mermaids, because they wanted to see which human was so powerful. They even came to find him, although they were outside and belonged to hostile forces. However, they all thought it was important to recognize the number one person of the younger generation of mankind. As a result, wherever Han Fei passed, all kinds of strange creatures surrounded him. Fish, turtles, shrimp, centipedes, Pegasus, black snakes, sunflower people, clam girls, and so on could be seen everywhere. Finally, Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan came to their destination, the Martial Emperor City bookstore. The reason why Han Fei came here was that he had one thing to do, which was to find the dragon subduing heaven's Xian Yellow Sutra. He got the dragon swallowing technique and the dragon slaying technique from Zhao Xianglong, but he lacked the Xian Yellow Sutra. As the saying goes, if you want to practice the dragon slaying technique, you must first practice the Xian Yellow Sutra. In Han Fei's Forge the Universe, there was still a dragon corpse. After returning this time, he must enter the ideal palace again. At that time, if he wanted to negotiate with this dragon corpse, he must have the ability to slay a dragon. After all, if what Zhao Xianglong said was true, there should be an azure dragon in the sea expansion realm that escaped. Han Fei wasn't sure if the one in the ideal palace was the escaped azure dragon. If it was, then this was a dragon in the sea expansion realm, but it had temporarily fallen to the venerable realm. If the Sutra Tower of the Taishan Heaven was the largest library in the Chaotic Ocean, then the bookstore in the Chaotic Ocean Martial Emperor City was the second largest. Here, in addition to the top techniques of the major forces, almost all the powerful techniques of the entire Chaotic Ocean were gathered. As soon as Han Fei entered the bookstore, the eyes of a waiter lit up. A waiter came to the two of them. "Your Excellency Han Fei, Your Excellency, I'm number 198. May I ask what kind of technique you need?" Han Fei said casually, "I need the most detailed map of the Chaotic Ocean." He also needed a copy of the Xian Yellow Sutra. "Do you have it?" Hearing this, number 198's heart did a flip. "Yes, please wait a moment, Your Excellency." Now, everyone knew that Han Fei was a rich man. A few months ago, he spent close to 100 million in the Super Resource Store. Today, he came to ask for the map. The map of the Chaotic Azure Sea was a sea route. Naturally, Martial Emperor City had the most plentiful sea route. Apart from the top 10 pirate crews and some major factions, there was probably no one who could afford to buy all the routes. Only Han Fei, who was rich, dared to ask for so much. A moment later, number 198 brought over the 2 jade slips and said, "Your Excellency, this is the most detailed map of the Chaotic Azure Sea. This map contains all the common routes in the entire Chaotic Azure Sea, some unique routes, and some abandoned routes. There are a total of 720 routes, valued at 24 million supreme-grade spirit stones." Han Fei's eyelids twitched when he heard that. Damn, a map was sold for 24 million? This was the first time he had seen it. However, he still had to buy this map. Only by familiarizing himself with the routes of the Chaotic Azure Sea would he be able to do some things in the future. Number 198 said, "Your Excellency, because of the importance of the route information, no one is willing to release it. Every time we release it, we will be in more danger. So, the price is a bit high, but it's definitely worth it." Han Fei nodded slightly. "What about the Xian Yellow Sutra?" Number 198 said, "The Xian Yellow Sutra is valued at 3.8 million ultra-quality spiritual stones. This is the ultimate technique of the dragon-subduing heaven. It is said that few people in the entire dragon-subduing heaven know it. There are many people who want to buy it, but the purpose of practicing this technique is mainly to be used with the dragon-swallowing technique and dragon-slaying technique. Among them, the dragon-slaying technique is the dragon-subduing heaven technique, which is not available in the bookstore of the Martial Emperor City. But we do have the dragon-swallowing technique. If you buy the two together, it will only cost 6 million ultra-quality spiritual stones." Han Fei's eyelids twitched. "No, the Xian Yellow Sutra is enough. Hey, your bookstore also has a 5% discount for every 10 million ultra-quality spiritual stones, and so on?" Number 198 smiled and said, "Yes." Han Fei's heart did a flip. In this way, he had already spent 27.8 million. If he took a 10% discount, it would be 25 million. But if he bought 30 million, he would still get more than 25 million even at a 15% discount. Of course, it was more cost-effective to buy 30 million ultra-quality spiritual stones. Han Fei couldn't help but look at Xia Xiaochan. "Girl, do you want to buy books?" Xia Xiaochan shook her head repeatedly. "I've read all the books I should read. As for those cultivation techniques, in fact, I have accumulated them myself. I don't need to buy them from you." "Then let me see." Han Fei's heart did a flip. He didn't need anything. There were too many things that needed to be digested. However, the people of the Inyang heaven generally didn't have high cultivation levels. Perhaps because of the geographical restrictions, it was really difficult for the Inyang heaven to have some strong masters rise quickly. Han Fei immediately said, "Let me take a look at the catalogue of all the books in the bookstore." Number 198 was stunned for a while. "Just look at the catalogue?" Xia Xiaochan understood what Han Fei meant. Maybe some kings knew the reasons, but these reasons were not known to number 198. When a row of jade slips was laid out, in Forge the Universe, Han Fei quickly grabbed a jade slip, scanned it with his perception, and finally found a cultivation technique called the Sun-Moon Spirit Swallowing Technique. The reason why Han Fei chose this technique was that he wanted to find a technique suitable for ordinary people in the Inyang heaven to cultivate quickly. Han Fei said, "What do you think of this Sun-Moon Spirit Swallowing Technique?" Number 198 was stunned for a moment. With so many books, it was difficult for him to tell the advantages and disadvantages of a technique. With a swish, a familiar figure appeared in front of Han Fei and the others. Who else could it be but Zhang Luotian, who presided over the martial emperor's inheritance trial? Zhang Luotian said, "The Sun-Moon Spirit Swallowing Technique is a complete high-quality cultivation technique, including all the techniques from Fisherman to Sea Expansion. It is suitable for popular cultivation. Although it's not an ultra-quality technique, the advantage is that it can be cultivated day and night, and the cultivation progress is extremely fast. The disadvantage is that the cultivation speed is too fast. If there is no body refining technique to tap the cultivation potential, the foundation can't be polished very well. Even if you grow up, you will eventually become a commoner." Han Fei frowned. As long as the cultivation speed was fast, it would be fine. The Inyang heaven was different from the outside world. In the Inyang heaven, most people couldn't even become fishing masters in their lifetime. Although this cultivation technique was not very good, it could improve the overall level of the Inyang heaven by at least one level. When he returned to the Inyang heaven, he would open the cultivation techniques of the major families to everyone, so that the overall cultivation level of the Inyang heaven could be improved by another level. Of course, Han Fei knew that it was impossible to catch up with the level of others in tens of thousands of years in just a few decades. However, the more backward they were, the faster they would catch up. Just like the transition from a primitive society to a modern society, under the premise of sufficient resources and education, this transition could be very fast. Han Fei immediately said, "That's it? How much does it cost?" Zhang Luotian said, "A complete cultivation technique will only become more and more expensive. Excluding the Pioneer Sea Realm, it only costs 5.8 million. Including the Pioneer Sea Realm, it costs 12 million. Han Fei could understand this price. It was normal for this kind of unconventional cultivation technique to be expensive. After all, under normal circumstances, a cultivation technique from the Fisher realm to the Explorer realm was quite cheap. From this price range, it could be seen that, if he only needed a cultivation technique from the Fisher realm to the Explorer realm, he might only need 2.8 million to buy it. However, to the Pioneer Sea realm, it would cost 12.8 million. This was the magic of the Pioneer Sea realm. And as Han Fei pointed out, in the entire Inyang heaven, there were extremely few cultivation techniques that could directly cultivate to the Pioneer Sea realm. Therefore, this price was acceptable to him. Han Fei nodded and said, "I'll buy the full set." Zhang Luotian nodded slightly. Number 198 bowed respectfully and calculated the price for Han Fei. "Your Excellency Han Fei, the total price is 46 million. With a 20% discount, it's 32.48 million ultra-quality spiritual stones." This time, it was Han Fei's turn to be speechless. Han Fei thought to himself, "Do you think it's easy for me?" In the past, when he saw the ultra-quality spiritual stones, he would guard them like treasures. But now, the top-grade spirit stones were spent like running water, gone just like that. Han Fei said in surprise, "I'll pay with an ultra-quality divine weapon." At that time, many onlookers were shocked. Since when did ultra-quality divine weapons become the mainstream currency? Han Fei sold 3,000 ultra-quality divine weapons a month ago. Now, he wanted to pay with ultra-quality divine weapons? How many ultra-quality divine weapons did this guy have? Someone was speechless. Damn, is he the illegitimate son of the Lord of Thunder and Fire? How many ultra-quality divine weapons did he have? Han Fei counted, and in the end, he sold more than 1,300 ultra-quality divine weapons. In the end, a total of 1,353 ultra-quality divine weapons were counted. The previous 2 transactions of ultra-quality divine weapons directly consumed half of the ultra-quality divine weapons Han Fei had. Now, Han Fei's wealth was the wealth of the Yin-Yang Heaven. When Han Fei became the true master of the Yin-Yang Heaven, 80% of these things would be contributed. But the Yin-Yang Heaven was poor. Why should he, a rich man, keep a mountain of treasures? When this transaction was done, Han Fei knew that it was time to end his trip to the Martial Emperor City. Second update. Asking for votes, end of this chapter. Chapter 1856. A month later, Han Fei's interaction with Song Kaiyuan and the others temporarily came to an end after the trial of the Martial Emperor's inheritance. Han Fei was really in high demand at this time. If he was caught by someone, his skin would be peeled off and his whole body would be a treasure. They did not dare to act recklessly because Han Fei had the 3 conditions of the Martial Emperor City. In the past few days, when Han Fei suddenly became low-key and even disappeared, many people realized that this person had probably left Martial Emperor City. Although there were many spies everywhere in the Martial Emperor City, it was impossible to notice an expert of Han Fei's level, even if he was an ordinary Pioneer Sea Realm expert. Moreover, Han Fei was good at concealment. This was not something new. In the past, he could transform into the black and white ghosts and rob everywhere. Now, he could naturally transform into someone else and escape. However, most people did not care about Han Fei's departure. Those who knew where Han Fei would eventually go. Those who did not know were not qualified to participate in the hunt for Han Fei. Moreover, because Han Fei had obtained the Martial Emperor's inheritance, now, he must have the support of the Martial Emperor City. Therefore, even if the major forces were interested in Han Fei, they hesitated and did not make a move. Of course, whether they could do it or not was another matter. However, many people were willing to go to the Savage Abyss to watch the fun. Therefore, when Han Fei left the Martial Emperor City, many people went to the Savage Abyss to wait. However, what they did not know was that Han Fei's first target was not the Savage Abyss, but the 10,000 Poison Sky. On this day, the main city of the 10,000 Poison Sky, the Spider King City. When Han Fei arrived, he found that the Spider King City looked no different from a normal city. It was just that, he would occasionally see some strange people with different auras, as if they had been poisoned. The urban planning of the Spider King City was not so magical. If one went to the various islands to take a look, he would feel that the 10,000 Poison Sky was very strange. For example, there was a forest of 10,000 ants. There were all kinds of ants in the forest. They were colorful and colorful. Every tree here was crawling with ants. There were insect nests and strange tumors in the places where these poisonous creatures gathered. It seemed that they were artificially bred here. There was also a place called the Insect Breeding Valley. There were more than 1,000,000 kinds of poisonous insects gathered here. These poisonous insects fought and killed each other all day long. Not the most poisonous but the more poisonous. Han Fei and Xia Shaochan found the rare poison shop in the Spider King City. When Han Fei and Xia Shaochan arrived, a waiter immediately said, "What kind of poison would you like to have? Recently, our shop has sold a few big poisons. It won't be a problem for poison to injure the divine soul. Han Fei couldn't help but ask, "How many poisons does your precious poison shop have?" "Today, this young master wants to purchase, in large quantities, the price is very high." The waiter of Precious Poison Shop was stunned for a moment, and then secretly rejoiced. "It seems that I'm going to make a fortune today?" The attendant said, "Gentlemen, there are currently more than 30,000 types of poisons that can enter our Precious Poison Workshop. Excuse me, what kind of poison would you like to purchase?" Han Fei knew nothing about poisons anyway. How would he know what type of poison it was? However, Han Fei said, "It doesn't matter what type I want. Just give me the album, and I'll keep an eye on it." The waiter was slightly taken aback. This customer's request is so strange. If you study poisons, you naturally need to know the nature of poisons. Do you want to study all kinds of big poisons in an all-round way? However, when the waiter was about to speak, he heard someone say, "You can leave. I'll greet the guest." An old man suddenly appeared at the entrance of the underground staircase. The old man said with a smile, "Gentlemen, my subordinates are not very sensible and can't see the strength of the guests. Please forgive me if I offend you." As he spoke, the old man slightly cupped his hands to Han Fei. Seeing this scene, many waiters were dumbfounded for a moment. This man of their Precious Poison Shop was a real half-king. His purpose in Precious Poison Shop was to study all kinds of big poisons. Otherwise, he would have left a long time ago. They had never seen this old man talk to anyone. Han Fei was the first one. The old man said, "Do you want poisons?" Seeing Han Fei nod, the old man said with a smile, "You too have reached such a realm at such a young age, which is really admirable. However, since you're here to look for poisons, please come with me." Han Fei and Xia Xiaochan didn't doubt it. After all, Precious Poison Shop was also doing business. Although it might be a little troublesome to ask for customers, business would be easier if the customers were influential, right? After a while, the two of them came to the 8th floor underground. This was the preferential treatment of a half-king powerhouse. On this 8th floor, it could be said to be colorful. As soon as he entered here, Han Fei's eyelids twitched. He reached out and took Xia Xiaochan's hand, and in an instant, all the poison that fell on Xia Xiaochan was absorbed by him. The old man didn't think that these poisons could hurt the two half-kings, so he said with a smile, "If you're looking for poisons, my Precious Poison Shop has a lot of big poisons." With that said, the old man handed a jade slip to Han Fei and said, "Fellow Taoist, please take a look. If you need anything, just tell me." Han Fei took the jade slip and nodded slightly, but when he scanned it with his perception, he immediately found that there were more than a lot of poisons. Han Fei had never thought that there would be so many poisons in this world. From this point of view, the poison god that Chao Qiu refined in the Yinyang heaven could only be regarded as a plaything. Soon, Han Fei saw a lot of poisons that he already had. They were the poisons that he exchanged with Dongfang Ming and Bai Jingjiu. Now, according to the price of the Precious Poison Shop, the poisons that the two people exchanged for him turned out to be of quite high quality. It seemed that they were all very expensive. However, on second thought, it made sense. After all, it was impossible for a heavenly talent to carry ordinary poisons. Han Fei originally came to the 10,000 Poisons Heaven just to buy some things, and he didn't intend to stay at all. Therefore, Han Fei was quite straightforward. After only a moment, Han Fei threw the jade slip to the old man and said, "Calculate for me, how much is it in total?" The old man took the jade slip and looked at it, thinking, "So soon, you've chosen? It seems that you're an expert." However, when he scanned with his perception, he found that there were a total of 2,710 kinds of poisons that Han Fei had marked out, all of which were of good quality and of various types. The old man's eyelids couldn't help but twitch. "Guys, you bought a bit too many poisons, didn't you? More than 2,700 kinds, and their medicinal properties are so complicated? This will cost a lot of money." However, Han Fei's next words directly choked the old man. Han Fei said, I don't want the ones I marked out, but I want all the others. Puff. Cough, cough. The old man was dumbfounded. What the hell? Did I hear it wrong? You don't want the ones I marked out, but you want all the others? Why don't you just buy out my precious poison workshop? If I buy it, it's all yours. However, the old man's heart did a flip, and his face became solemn. Guys, you bought so many poisons at once. If your identity is not revealed, I don't dare to do this business. Han Fei was speechless. What kind of precious poison shop is this? I just want to buy some poisons. However, Han Fei certainly couldn't show anything on the surface. So Han Fei casually threw out a spider token. Han Fei threw out a spider token, which was given to him by Bai Jingjiu. Who would have thought that it would actually work? The old man was slightly surprised and said with a look of astonishment, Great Desolate Token? Are you from the Great Desolate Swamp? The old man looked at the token for a moment and immediately said, Please wait a moment. It will take some time to count the poisons. Besides, the poisons of the precious poison shop are not only in my shop. If you really want to buy it, I have to go to other shops to transfer the goods. Han Fei nodded slightly. Just go. Han Fei didn't intend to cause too much trouble. Now that he could borrow the name of the Great Desolate Swamp, he would do it. Anyway, after buying this batch of poisons, he was going to leave. He didn't intend to stay in the 10,000 poison heaven for long. However, what Han Fei didn't know was that when the old man went to another shop, he quickly reported to someone. Someone appeared. Sure enough, someone came to buy poison with the Great Desolate Token. After half an hour, more than 20 advanced Venerable Realm experts came to the precious poison shop where Han Fei was. Seeing this, Xia Shaochan couldn't help asking, Is it a trick? Han Fei shook his head slightly. We're all here to deliver things. That old man is not stupid. How can he not see through our strength? However, in the next moment, the corners of Han Fei's mouth curled up slightly. He said without scruples, Even if the myriad poison ancestor comes in person, it's not a big problem. There are not many sea expansion realm experts who can stop me. Heh. Boy, you're quite arrogant. Suddenly, an old man with a dragon crutch suddenly appeared in this precious poison shop. In an instant, everyone else in the precious poison shop was moved out. There were only 3 people left in the entire precious poison shop, and the one who came was none other than Huang Jie. As soon as he felt the perception of a king, Han Fei knew that he couldn't hide it anymore. He said, Elder Huang, you really know who I am. You've actually made preparations in advance. Are you sure that I will take the bait? Huang Jie's voice was slightly hoarse. You have no reason not to take the bait. Your ability to resist poison is far from enough. If I really want to poison you, you can't escape. Han Fei smiled and said, That's not necessarily true. No matter how strong the poison is, how can it resist the light of time? Huang Jie didn't respond to this. He immediately said, Holy Child Shuizhan, Yinyang Heaven's Han Fei. Interesting. You can only blame yourself for being too obvious at that time. If you hadn't swapped poisons with my 2 foolish disciples, this old man really wouldn't have discovered you. But you did. Elder Huang, why didn't you expose me at that time? Huang Jie replied, Why should I expose you? Ji Xian and Yi Qinglong, neither of them good guys. Why should this prince expose you? The 3rd time. Please vote. End of this chapter. Chapter 1857. At this moment, Huang Jie had no malicious intent towards Han Fei. Han Fei could clearly feel that. In fact, Huang Jie had known that Han Fei was Shuizhan, but he didn't expose Han Fei in the land of the Kinggrave, which was a great favor. People always said that old people were shrewd. Huang Jie was also a king of the older generation. How could he not have a reason to help him? Han Fei immediately said, Senior Huang, since you're here in person, just say what you want. Thank you for your help in the land of the Kinggrave. May I know what you need, Senior? Huang Jie couldn't help but say, "Didn't you say that you were going to exchange the key to the imperial palace for poison?" Han Fei was embarrassed and thought, "I'm already so rich. Isn't it nice for me to buy poison with money?" However, Huang Jie didn't care about that. He continued, "I was wondering why the Snow Maidens would suddenly have a disciple like you. And you even abducted the princess of the mermaids. If you were discovered, the Snow God's temple would be gone." As he spoke, Huang Jie glanced at Xia Shaochan, which made her blush a little. Huang Jie continued, "Later, you plundered all the forces, especially the Grand Pure Palace, the Wuji Palace, and the other immortal palaces. Those things are not good. This time, your identity as the current palace master of the Yin-Yang Heaven has been exposed, and I'm not surprised. In particular, you've obtained the inheritance of the martial emperor, which means that you're very lucky. In this way, I'm not blind." Huang Jie was not the aloof king that others said. After talking for a while, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Han Fei. "I have tens of thousands of poisons here, which can be perfectly matched to push your poison resistance to the peak. As for the key to the Imperial Palace, to be honest, I don't care much about it. However, I need you to do me a favor." Han Fei spread out his hands. "Senior, please go ahead." Huang Jie grinned. "Help me go to the Medicine King Heaven and rob Old Lady Chio's Grand Supreme Purple Smoke Furnace. You can pay back the favor you owe me. As for the poisons in the 10,000 Poison Heaven, you can buy them." Grand Supreme Purple Smoke Furnace? Xia Shaochan couldn't help but exclaim. She tightened her grip on Han Fei's hand to remind him. Xia Shaochan said, "The Supreme Purple Smoke Cauldron is the most precious treasure of the Medicine King Heaven and is known as the Alchemy Divine Artifact. It was rumored that it could be used to refine 8th-grade divine pills. If you snatch it, you'll be making an enemy out of the Medicine King Sky." Huang Jie didn't mind. This was a choice for Han Fei. It was up to Han Fei whether to do it or not. He said, "You've heard it. You won't have to pay much to make me an enemy of the Divine Palace. At the very least, you have to give me a proper reason, a reason that will allow this junior to snatch her away with a clear conscience." Xia Shaochan looked at Han Fei speechlessly. "Do you really want to go?" He heard Huang Jie say, "Of course. Because that Imperial Violet Smoke Furnace was originally this king's possession. Afterwards, I was tricked by that wicked woman. Who would have thought that she wouldn't give it to me? Not only did this old witch Chiu deceive me, she even tried to kill me with poison. But how could I be hurt by poison? In return, I gave that old witch a great Tao soul poison. Even now, she still hasn't recovered." Han Fei and Xia Shaochan looked at each other in bewilderment. So Huang Jie of the 10,000 Poison Heaven and old Madame Chiu of the Medicine King Heaven were in love? As a result, old Huang Jie suffered a double loss. He didn't get the beauty, but he lost the ultimate treasure. Of course, Han Fei couldn't believe Huang Jie's side of the story. He secretly activated the nautical panorama and asked, "Who should I believe?" As a result, the nautical panorama pointed at old Huang Jie without hesitation. Han Fei couldn't help saying, "Elder Huang, if things are as you said, then we should indeed snatch the Supreme Purple Smoke Furnace back. But don't hide anything. If I wander around the Medicine King Heaven and find that they have more interesting plots than you, I won't be able to do anything then." Old Huang Jie immediately shouted, "There's nothing to hide. Old Madame Chiu is very evil. She also attacked the Yin-Yang Heaven. Don't say you don't know this." At that time, there was more than one king in the 10,000 Poison Heaven. It was this old witch who secretly plotted against this prince's younger brother. Otherwise, I would have killed my way into the Medicine King Heaven and destroyed it. Han Fei and Xia Shaochan were more and more shocked. It seemed that the life experiences of the seniors were also extremely rich and colorful. They loved each other and killed each other, and this matter lasted for tens of thousands of years. Han Fei couldn't help saying, "Senior, although I have some strength, But now you want me to go to the Medicine King heaven to rob something? And it's such a first-class, ultimate treasure. I'm afraid I won't be able to return. Huang Jie said, Don't panic. You are now the target of everyone. It's good enough that you can survive. In addition to buying poison, your trip should also be to return to the Savage Abyss, right? I don't expect you to do this for me now. But you have to keep it in mind. This is what you promised me. You have to do it for me sooner or later. This is what you owe me. Han Fei was silent for a moment and said, Why me? Huang Jie grinned. Because you have achieved what you have now, so it's you. If you hadn't gone to the Martial Emperor City, or if you hadn't come to the 10,000 Poison Heaven, I naturally wouldn't have asked you to do this. Han Fei smiled. Okay, I agree to this. Huang Jie chuckled and then said, Hey, kid, as far as I know, you should have a lot of that stinky liquid on you, right? Don't you want to trade for poison? Why don't you trade it for that? Han Fei was a little speechless. This old man is still thinking about my stinky smell? Back then, he taught both Bai Jingzhou and Dongfang Ming a lesson. At this moment, Han Fei originally wanted to buy poison. If he could trade the stinky liquid for poison, it would actually be very cost-effective. After all, he still had a lot of that stinky liquid. Even if he consumed a lot, he still had 12 sun moon shells. Han Fei said decisively, How? Huang Jie said leisurely, I will personally choose tens of thousands of poisons for you. It's not a loss for you to exchange 200,000 kilograms of stinky liquid. The corner of Han Fei's mouth twitched. Senior, when I sold it to your disciple, I didn't sell it at this price. Huang Jie said, Right now, you're not trading with this prince's disciple. You're trading with this prince. Besides, there are strong and weak poisons, and there are also good and bad poisons. I will help you find more than tens of thousands of kilograms of stinky liquid. Han Fei spread his hand. But I don't have that much. That's about all the poisons I have. I'm going to use it to resist the enemy. If they were all taken away by you, how would this junior defend against the enemy? Huang Jie said, You don't even cultivate poison. What can you use it for? How about this? 150,000 caddies. How could this prince not know? This dirty place must have stored the feces of the giant whale, which must have been hidden for tens of thousands of years. How can there be less? 150,000 kilograms is too cheap for you. Han Fei said, 100,000 kilograms, no more than that. My treasures don't come from the wind. You mean, the poisons of the Medicine King heaven come from the wind? That's the result of countless people testing the poisons themselves. The two of them talked back and forth and finally made a deal of 130,000 kilograms of stinky liquid. And Han Fei only got less than 40,000 kinds of poisons. Han Fei didn't care about the 130,000 kilograms of stinky liquid, but he sighed that Huang Jie was too good at bargaining. However, Han Fei didn't argue anymore, because the success of this transaction, in a way, meant some kind of alliance between the Yinyang Heaven and the 10,000 Poison Heaven. As for the formal alliance, it would be when he helped Huang Jie obtain the Imperial Violet Smoke Furnace. So far, the number of immortal palaces that had maintained a friendly attitude with him had reached 6. This number only accounted for 1/6 of the 36 mysterious heavens. However, if the Yinyang Heaven and the Waterwood Heaven were counted, his side was already a huge force. After taking Huang Jie's poisons, Han Fei and Xia Shaochan naturally didn't stay in the 10,000 Poison Heaven for long. Just as Han Fei left the 10,000 Poison Heaven, suddenly Han Fei felt his heart skip a beat. Old Yuan had broken through to the peak stage of the Venerable Realm. Yes, Old Yuan had stayed in his Forge the Universe for so long. In addition to sleeping all day, he cultivated. The point was that he could also cultivate while sleeping. This was also a characteristic of the Turtle Clan. As soon as he saw that Old Yuan had made a breakthrough, Han Fei immediately released the Hexagon Starfish. Swish! As soon as the Hexagon Starfish appeared, Its big eyes immediately glanced around and secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he found that everything was fine. However, when the hexagon starfish saw Han Fei's malicious eyes, the whole starfish didn't feel good at all. For others, it was not easy to cultivate in the sea-quelling painting. However, for the hexagon starfish, a guy who carried 6 small worlds full of resources with him, why couldn't it train? Seeing that Han Fei's eyes were not right, the hexagon starfish immediately said, "I have a feeling that I will make a breakthrough soon, in 3 days at most." Chapter 1858. The Savage Abyss was an extremely obvious and unique danger zone in the chaotic Azure Sea. Half a month ago, a lot of people had gathered around the Savage Abyss. Most of them were there to watch a show. The main reason was that Han Fei had exposed the Yin-Yang Heaven. What was in the Savage Abyss where the Yin-Yang Heaven was? It was a place that the major forces in the chaotic ocean had never set foot in. Someone had indeed broken in and taken a look. However, those who were able to come out safely did not manage to obtain the information they wanted. Although someone had found the entrance to the Yin-Yang Heaven 80,000 years ago, everyone in the chaotic ocean was about the same level. Nobody was much stronger than anyone else. At that time, they didn't dare to enter the Yin-Yang Heaven. Later, when the Yin-Yang Grindstone appeared, no one below the Pioneer Sea level was qualified to explore it. Even the kings dared not set foot in the Yin-Yang Grindstone. It was no longer a force that could be shaken by humans. It had become a super-array that operated naturally. At this moment, Han Fei's identity had been exposed, and he had abducted Xia Shaochan openly. How could the royal family of the mermaids stand it when their princess had been abducted? At this moment near the Savage Abyss, a bewitchingly charming youth was currently facing off against 3 kings. The evil young man was arrogant, and there seemed to be contempt and mockery in his voice. He said, "Only the 3 of you came from the investiture heaven? How disrespectful is the infamily to the royal family of the mermaids." On the opposite side, the 3 middle-aged men with cold faces were surging with blood. Among them, the leader said with surging blood, "Chun Huangyan, the unfilial daughter of the infamily doesn't even want to be the princess of the royal family of the mermaids. She has already run away with a wild boy. She doesn't appreciate your kindness. Why do you care about her?" Chun Huangyan chuckled. "That's not how it is. Whatever the little princess thought and did, that was the little princess' business. What I think and what I do is my business. I'll catch the little princess back if she runs away. If the infamily dares to hurt the princess of the royal family of the mermaids, I'll certainly kill you." "Hey! A fish can't spit its tongue out. Chun Huangyan, even if you're among the top 10 pioneer sea levels in the chaotic ocean, so what? In the end, sea expansion was still sea expansion. We're all at the sea expansion realm, but you want to kill the 3 of us? Who gave you the courage to say something like that?" Chun Huangyan slightly shook his head. "Hey! There were always some people who took their ignorance as courage. There are some things that you can't see as clearly as my little princess. You should know that your low-grade bloodline has made you arrogant to the point of ignorance." At that moment, Chun Huangyan was nowhere to be seen. The crowd could only see a fingerprint descending from the sky, resulting in a brilliant fiery glow. This finger sealed the void and froze time. In the blink of an eye, it had devoured all the vigorous spiritual qi in a radius of 10,000 miles. The might of a single strike had reached a level that could truly shake the heavens and the earth and overturn mountains and seas. The 3 sea expansion experts' expressions changed. "Not good. It's a divine art, the heavenly shaking finger. With such power, he has already split open the sky. Seal of the gods, rise." The 3 sea expansion experts stepped on triangular light, their 3-hand seals combining as one as they soared into the sky. Rumble! In the middle of the chaotic ocean, a whirlpool appeared in the space of 10,000 li. It lasted for 3 seconds, and billions of tons of seawater were swallowed. In the next second, Chun Huangyan held a spear with one hand behind his back. Since it's said that I've been hiding my strength, why don't you believe it? Do you think I'm not strong enough to split open the sky? After that, Chun Huangyan pushed the spear with one hand. Before the spear aura was launched, 1,000-kilometer gap appeared on the sea, and the surface of the sea was cut open. With a thrust of the spear, it was as if a giant who could carry the heavens and earth had launched a divine attack. The shadow of the spear itself was 100 kilometers long. It was not hard to imagine how powerful the spear was. God's arrival. The special technique of the investiture of God's heaven was called God's arrival, which could also be considered a divine technique. After it was used, the user's strength would be doubled. It was said that it was the power of a real god. But in fact, it was obviously not. However, whether or not it could be used, the technique was still horrifying. It was not hard to imagine how horrifying the strength of an expansion C-state expert could be if he used it. However, even so, the expert of the investiture of God's heaven who performed the God's arrival slashed the void and created a gap between the sky and the earth. The two kings of the investiture of God's heaven charged out instantly. The man thought that even if Chun Huangyan was in the heaven-opening state, he couldn't kill him easily. However, Chun Huangyan was unstoppable, so he decided to retreat. However, when he cleared the way for his two companions, the spear aura had arrived. On the opposite side, Chun Huangyan said casually, "You could have escaped if you ran on your own. It's a shame that you missed this opportunity." After the spear aura, a giant hand stretched across 10,000 kilometers and slashed down vertically. At this moment, the world was eclipsed again. The surging tides swirled between the sky and the earth. It was impossible to distinguish the sky from the earth, and it was impossible to see the night and day. At this moment, Han Fei said to Xia Shaochan, "Don't worry. As long as I enter the savage abyss, even Chun Huangyan can't come in. Moreover, I personally asked the Martial King for a chance to make a move. However strong Chun Huangyan is, can he be stronger than King Wu?" Xia Shaochan was rather worried. She felt much better under Han Fei's comfort. She said, "Although I don't like Chun Huangyan, he's indeed a once-in-a-thousand-year heavenly talent of the mermaids. It's said that his Tao is to cut the sky. It sounds like a battle technique, but in fact, that's his Tao." Han Fei said casually, "Cut the sky? He's quite a braggart. Did the sky offend him? Did he say that he was going to cut the sky?" Pucci, Xia Shaochan couldn't help but chuckle. What a joke. The cultivation of cultivators is against nature in the first place. However, that Tao is indeed weird. Who could have created such a Tao? Boom! Suddenly, the sky changed color. Both of them raised their heads, only to see a bloody crack across the sky. A rain of blood was pouring, the Tao was roaring, and the sky was crying. Han Fei couldn't have looked more awful. That was the sign of a king dying. Earlier, when the Ba King died, Han Fei had seen the sign of the sky crying. In the chaotic ocean, even the death of a venerable couldn't trigger a celestial phenomenon. Unless enough venerables died in the same area at the same time, it wouldn't trigger a celestial phenomenon. But the celestial phenomenon that Han Fei saw was even bigger than the one when the Ba King died. Who was it that had fallen? Why did they die in the savage abyss? Xia Shaochan also exclaimed, "A king died? A battle between kings took place here." Han Fei narrowed his eyes and said, "The battle took place far away from here. However, the celestial phenomenon was so clear and the blood rain covered such a large area. It was definitely not an ordinary king. The one who died must have been very strong." Han Fei immediately said, "Girl, go back to the sea-quelling painting. I'll take the rest of the way." Xia Xiaochan's face was pale. She knew what Han Fei was worried about. If the vicinity of the savage abyss was already this dangerous, then they would not be able to swagger around like this. Of course, Xia Shaochan knew that only Han Fei could enter the savage abyss. She couldn't stay outside and drag Han Fei down. So she nodded and said, "Okay." After a while, when Xia Shaochan entered the sea-quelling painting, Han Fei put away the Avenger and said solemnly, "Old Yuan, it's up to you whether we can return to the Yin-Yang heavens safely or not." The old turtle was speechless. "Why are you looking at me? My strength has just recovered to the peak of the venerable realm. There's still a long way to go before I become a half-king." However, Han Fei said solemnly, "Don't be ridiculous. You don't have the king's tribulation at all. If I'm not mistaken, you might be able to become a king now. With your emperor soul, you'll definitely be able to block it." The old turtle's face turned green. "I've worked so hard to polish my foundation, so I'm only a peak-level venerable now. Otherwise, I would have become a king long ago. Wouldn't it ruin my future to let me fight?" The old turtle said angrily, "Don't you still have the promise of the martial emperor city?" Han Fei said, "Although the promise of the martial emperor city is beautiful, nothing is absolute. Although the martial emperor city can suppress the chaotic ocean, what if something happens? After all, I'm not related to you, so I can't trust you completely. Isn't it you who I trust the most?" The old turtle said with a black face, "Thank you, but Han Fei knew what the old turtle was afraid of, and he continued, "You are using Gui Sanqing's body, which is a low-level turtle with a low-level bloodline. Is such a turtle worth your effort? When we leave the chaotic azure sea in the future, I will find your true body. Wouldn't it be nice to become an emperor in a second?" The old turtle said helplessly, "Okay, don't play dumb. If you really want me to fight, I estimate that I can only fight 3 times at most if it's a sea-opening realm expert. If it's a heaven-opening realm expert, then don't count on me. I'm just an emperor soul, and I can't stop him at all." Han Fei smiled and said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I will definitely return to the Yin-Yang heaven this time." Chapter 1859. When Han Fei found Xia Shaochan, he didn't want her to return to the mermaid royal family. No matter how good the conditions of the mermaid royal family were, how good their teachers were, and how powerful their forces were, as long as Xia Shaochan was willing, he would kill them. Even he didn't know if he could defeat them. Even so, he would still kill them. In fact, Han Fei had an ultimate backup plan. This plan would only be carried out as a last resort. That was to transcend the tribulation in the chaotic ocean and become a king. But now it was different. Now the martial emperor city had taken action. If the martial emperor city couldn't even do this well, then their reputation of suppressing the chaotic ocean would be a failure. Of course, before going to the barbaric abyss, Han Fei had to test his luck first. He took out the 9-palace ruler of Providence, moved the ruler, and soon it landed on the peace hexagram. Han Fei breathed a sigh of relief. At least for today, this was a good thing. However, going to the depths of the barbaric abyss couldn't be reached in a day. Although he was going along the vortex of the abyss, it was different from the countercurrent when he came. However, he had to cover it up. Once he moved too fast, it would be easy to expose his flaws. Now, according to the route, he was about 5 million kilometers away from the edge of the vortex of the barbaric abyss. From here on, Han Fei had already turned into a black mist and was moving. One day later, Han Fei wandered around the periphery of the barbaric abyss, more than 800,000 kilometers away. At this time, Han Fei met an acquaintance, Chen Guangjia of the Gale Pirates. At this moment, he was leaning against the wall, resting. On the ship, Chen Guangjia lay on a chair, narrowed his eyes and said, "Where the F***ck did the 4 crazy kings go? Doesn't he know that kings have begun to fall here? Why are they still running around?" Someone said, "Boss, the raiders have always been like that. Our brothers won't like it if we ally with them." "Humph, why would they like it? What I want is the madness of the 4 crazy kings. When this guy goes crazy, who will take his bad luck? Won't we be very safe? You youngsters just don't know any better." Han Han Fei just took this opportunity to stop and observe the situation. Based on this direction, the Gale pirate gang and the Marauders pirate gang should have occupied this area. The other pirate gangs should not be too far away. In such a big scene, a single pirate group could easily be attacked by the crowd. After all, there were definitely quite a number of people from the 10 great pirate crews who wanted to deal with him. Therefore, in this situation, the 10 pirate crews were a natural alliance. In other places, everyone could fight however they wanted. However, if there was internal strife here and they were surrounded and killed by others, the major pirate crews might have to give up their lives here. Seeing that there were still 4 hours before the end of the day, Han Fei thought to himself, I have to walk slowly if I don't want to be noticed. However, 4 hours was enough for him to explore the surroundings of the savage abyss. 4 hours later, Han Fei could already vaguely feel the attraction force. However, his current strength was still small. On the way, Han Fei also encountered a ghost ship. Or rather, he had run into a big ship of undead creatures. At that time, Han Fei didn't move at all. If he guessed right, this should be the immortal pirate. At this time, what if the immortal pirates found him? The consequences were unpredictable. Once he was exposed, how could he escape? It would be very difficult. But fortunately, they were just passing by in a hurry. After a void teleportation, they didn't know where they went. A day had passed. Han Fei entered Forge the Universe and rested for a day. After reappearing, he tried the 9 Palace Ruler of Fortune again and got a bad hexagram. As soon as he saw this hexagram, Han Fei was relieved. He charged into the whirlpool. On the 3rd day, the 9 Palace Ruler of Fortune gave a bad hexagram. When he saw this hexagram, Han Fei was slightly relieved. But immediately, his heart sank again. He heaved a sigh of relief because he only encountered a bad hexagram. His heart sank because he knew that danger was coming. It was different from when he came. When he came to this chaotic ocean, although he was only in the half-king realm, his strength was not the same as it was now. Today, even in terms of pure strength, he was twice as strong as when he came. The degree of disassembly of spiritual energy had even reached a mythical level of 100%. However, when he left the savage abyss, no one knew about him. Therefore, he had enough time to slowly move out. After all, the resistance was too great, and his movement speed was extremely slow. However, after entering the chaotic ocean, it was different. The deeper he went into the vortex, the faster his speed was. It was so fast that he might be hundreds of thousands of kilometers around the center of the vortex in an instant. At this speed, in this situation, if he just let his body move with the vortex, even a sea expansion realm master might not be able to resist it. Therefore, the deeper he went into the vortex, the more likely Han Fei's concealment would fail. After all, he had to resist the power of the vortex. Today, Han Fei got a bad hexagram, and he was now at least 8 million kilometers away from the center of the vortex. The bad hexagram told Han Fei that danger would break out today. Wisps of chaotic energy poured into the 9 Palace Ruler. Han Fei wanted to suppress the bad hexagram. As long as it became a bad hexagram, everything would be fine. Unfortunately, after consuming more than 20 wisps of chaotic energy in a row, he still couldn't change the hexagram. It seemed that this hexagram couldn't be changed. At this time, the old turtle said, I think you can use the void teleportation technique to speed up now. Those who really want to stop you are at least in the sea expansion realm. Because no one can stop you except in the sea expansion realm. Sea expansion realm masters can resist the suction force. However, their range of perception and vision was also limited. Therefore, waiting for you 1,000,000 kilometers away from the vortex is the most reasonable and simplest way. Han Fei nodded slightly. He wanted to take out the nautical panorama to confirm the direction. Which direction should he go? However, when he thought that the nautical panorama only had 3 chances, since today's hexagram was bad, Whether he used the 9-palace ruler or not, the bad hexagram would come sooner or later. Therefore, Han Fei took a deep breath and quickly began to perform void teleportation. There was no telling if it was because of the vortex, but the distance of this void teleportation was more than 100,000 kilometers. Since Han Fei entered the chaotic ocean, he hadn't practiced this technique. Han Fei thought, it's probably related to the suction force of the savage abyss. Sure enough, the next teleportation range confirmed his guess. It turned out that the progress of his void teleportation was close to 200,000 kilometers. At this pace, it wouldn't be long before Han Fei was close to the edge of the vortex. Even if he used void teleportation, Han Fei was still very cautious. Every time he teleported, Han Fei would calculate with the old turtle. At this moment, Han Fei felt that the vortex had become extremely strong. Han Fei said solemnly, "Old Yuan, we're almost at the center." The old turtle said, "I feel a crisis. Hurry, teleport and charge in." With a thought, Han Fei directly used void transference. At the same time, he crushed a jade slip. Because at this moment, Han Fei sensed a strong sense of crisis too. Han Fei was still in the void, but the realm of nothingness was instantly broken. When Han Fei focused his eyes, he saw that Chun Huangyan was looking at him. When Chun Huangyan saw Han Fei, he put on a disdainful smile. "Do you think you're the only one who's good at the Gemini divine technique?" After Chun Huangyan left a projection, he moved through the void and appeared more than 100,000 kilometers away. He tapped the surface of the sea with the tip of his foot, and a drop of golden blood burst out in a terrifying explosion that swept across thousands of kilometers. Han Fei intentionally left the drop of golden blood for Chun Huangyan to see. It was obvious that he had left a backup plan here. The drop of essence blood contained a lot of resources, enough for Han Fei to be reborn. However, it was stomped by Chun Huangyan, and it only took him a moment to stomp. When he took another step, Chun Huangyan sensed that something invisible was resisting the power of the vortex. He pointed his finger casually and pierced through the void. A blue halo spread out, and a shadow was pierced through. However, after the attack, Chun Huangyan felt that what he blew up was merely a shadow. Interesting. You secretly added a layer of the Tao of time. If you can run 1,000,000 kilometers away from me, you'll be quite capable. First, there was the body of white mist, then the trick of the drop of essence blood, and now a dummy with a layer of the Tao of time. Han Fei was indeed good at running. After a feint, he bought himself 2 void teleportations and moved 800,000 kilometers away. When Han Fei was about to continue using void teleportation, he saw a shadow suddenly standing in his way. At this moment, Han Fei's twin bodies became one. Han Fei's body of black mist returned to normal, and he became the real Han Fei. Chun Huangyan said, "You're not bad to be able to run 800,000 kilometers away from me. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Let's see if you can get away today." Han Fei stopped running and sneered. "Chun Huangyan, you're quite persistent. Don't tell me that you're doing this for Xia Xiaochan's sake. I think you're using her for other purposes, aren't you?" Chun Huangyan chuckled. "It's none of your business." Han Fei held his head high and said calmly, "It's my wife's business, but it's none of your business. I want to know who else could it be other than you? You know that you can't stop me on your own." Chapter 1860. Han Fei wasn't worried. Now that he couldn't hide himself anymore, he might as well get to know those who were supposed to come. He would be able to pay them back in the future. The roar of a dragon could be heard in the sky. Dragon scales interweaved, and King Wu had quietly appeared in this world. Han Fei didn't think that King Wu would deal with Chun Huangyan in person. After all, Chun Huangyan couldn't be stronger than King Wu, could he? He was someone who suppressed the chaotic ocean. Chun Huangyan narrowed his eyes too. "I didn't expect that King Wu would come in person. It seems that I'm quite a big shot." King Wu said indifferently, it's not enough for you alone. He Daoyuan, the Grand Pure Elder Bei Luochen, Emperor Qingdi of the Mermaids. Since you're all here, come on out. You've all reached the sky opening state, but you're bullying a junior in the half-king realm. That's humiliating. Han Fei's face was much uglier. Damn it, why are there so many people here? And they were all in the sky opening state? The emperors were going to attack him at the same time? Han Fei was lost for words. Since when were there so many emperors in the chaotic ocean? Shua. As he expected, in the next moment, apart from Chun Huangdian, 3 more people appeared in the sky. No matter how powerful the attraction force of the desolate abyss was, it wasn't worth mentioning for them at all. One of the 3 newcomers was wearing a green robe with a 3-foot-long sword made of golden light floating behind him. The man had pale hair and a handsome face. However, Han Fei knew that he was He Daoyuan, the strongest expert in the Grand Pure Palace. Chun Huangdian, who Han Fei knew from the mermaid's royal family, was a middle-aged man with a halberd in his hand. He was wearing a colorful fish scale suit, and he must be Emperor Qingdi that King Wu mentioned. The last one was a hermit expert of the Wuji Heavenly Palace who rarely showed up and didn't even manage the Divine Palace. Han Fei knew that the master of the Divine Palace of the Wuji Heavenly Palace was named Yun Tianhe. This man was named Bei Luochen, who looked similar to Bei Xianbing and Bei Tangxian. They must be a family. Han Fei was lost for words. A family had an emperor, a king, and a powerful young man? It was obvious that this family had extraordinary strength. Bei Luochen said, "Your Excellency, this is a dispute between us and the Yin-Yang Heaven. Back then, Jiang Linxian stole something and ran away. It's no longer about strength. This Han Fei can't go back today." He Daoyuan said leisurely, "I have long heard that King Wu's battle prowess is unparalleled. Today, I would like to trouble you, please enlighten me, King Wu." Li Qing Emperor said, "The martial Emperor City hasn't experienced a battle for a long time. Do you think you can take on the entire chaotic vast ocean with just one attack?" King Wu smiled faintly. That's right. The martial Emperor City had not fought for too long. However, with just the few of you, how can you represent the entire chaotic vast sea? With a wave of King Wu's hand, the scene in front of Han Fei changed. Han Fei was pushed 100,000 kilometers away by the martial king. The last scene that Han Fei saw was the appearance of the firmament Dharma body. The martial king single-handedly dealt with 4 people, leaving behind an extremely imposing figure. Han Fei naturally took this opportunity to escape. The moment he appeared, he used the Great Cosmos Shift and ran another 300,000 kilometers. If Han Fei could see King Wu's side, he would be shocked by King Wu's strength. Above King Wu's head, the sky-suspending sword tried to press down, and the 8 directions infinite wheel tried to cut him. A big halberd illuminated the sky, and a giant 10,000 meters tall attacked with the halberd. Chun Huangdian pointed a finger at the void, and the world was eclipsed. However, King Wu remained unmoved at the center of the storm. The 100-meter-tall Dharma body clenched its fists and hammered. Annihilation Fiend Fist. Almost in an instant, a pillar of light soared into the sky. Countless people could vaguely sense the terrifying power even though they were 1,000,000 kilometers away. Han Fei, who was running wildly, also sensed that a force was sweeping at him from behind. Even though he was hundreds of thousands of kilometers away, he could still sense the terrifying battle power in an instant. What was the battle of the heaven-opening state like? Since Chun Huangdian could participate in the battle of the heaven-opening state, was he really not in the Pioneer Sea state at all, as Xia Shaochan said? He was less than 2,000,000 kilometers away from the center of the abyssal chasm. When he was only about 1.8 million kilometers away, a void dragon flew straight at Han Fei. The void dragon took shape in midair. On a closer look, it seemed to be a human figure, and it used the marvelous technique of the Azure Dragon. Han Fei thought of something. Was it Long Yu Jun, The strongest merman of the royal family? As soon as the man spoke, Han Fei was even more certain of his identity. He said, "Although my disciple's methods weren't very honorable, he didn't deserve to die. You can't just kill him like that." However, as soon as he said that, a gust of wind rose in the vortex. A scholar, holding a feather fan, was waving it easily. Who else could it be but Zhang Luotian? Zhang Luotian glanced at Han Fei and then at Long Yujun. "Long Yujun, I'm told that you don't like foreign affairs. As it happens, I only like reading books and drinking tea. Why don't we live in peace?" The moment Zhang Luotian came out, Han Fei ran away without any scruples. It was less than 2 million kilometers away. With Han Fei's current ability, it would only take him a dozen seconds to cover such a short distance with his full strength. However, when Han Fei was only 1,000,000 kilometers away from the center of the abyssal chasm, 7 or 8 sea expansion kings suddenly flew over. When he took a closer look, he saw Ji Xian, whom Han Fei had met before, Bei Xianbing, whom he had shot before, and a few others that he didn't know. However, it was impossible for them to be weak king tiers. When they appeared, Han Fei saw that the martial emperor's cities invigilators of the martial emperor's inheritance trial had also quietly appeared. Only then did Han Fei realize how useful the 3 conditions of the martial emperor's city were. If King Wu hadn't come in person, he would have been killed a long time ago. Now, seeing that they were confronting each other, Han Fei continued to flee to the depths of the savage abyss without hesitation. At this moment, Han Fei had already activated the power of the Great Path. His strength was comparable to that of a king, and his speed was astonishingly fast. After a dozen seconds, Han Fei finally rushed to the entrance of the savage abyss. Han Fei immediately took out the nautical panorama and began to point without hesitation. However, to Han Fei's surprise, the nautical panorama didn't move at all. Oh no! An illusion? Han Fei's heart sank. Had he fallen into an illusion without knowing it? If he hadn't taken out the nautical panorama, he would have been in trouble. Fuse! Little Black and Little White instantly fused with each other, and the yin-yang divine eyes appeared. At that moment, Han Fei saw a man covered in fire and a woman standing on a big squid at the center of the vortex. Yu Meng of Dream Heaven? Nightmare Sea Squid. Golden Crow Heaven? Fire is not fierce? Since the 2 masters of the Divine Palace were here, Han Fei certainly couldn't neglect them. "Hu!" Han Fei roared, and a golden light lit up between his eyebrows. At the center of his brows, a golden eye opened. At that moment, Han Fei's strength soared. Yu Meng narrowed her eyes and said, "The yin-yang divine eyes broke my great illusion land. Unfortunately, you're only a half-king after all. No matter how strong you are, how can you defeat us in a short time?" Han Fei's face was solemn. When Han Fei was about to fight with all his strength, he saw that the sky was suddenly divided into 2 colors. One was white and the other was green, as if the sky had been cut in half. Immediately, Huobuli's face changed greatly. "Not good. The sky-severing sword is sword god Lu Qing." Han Fei's heart sank. Does it mean that Lu Qing openly supports the yin-yang heaven? In this way, the 4 palaces of the sword god would be hostile to the other divine palaces. However, Han Fei couldn't let this opportunity go. Han Fei didn't stay but continued to rush to the center of the abyssal chasm with a swish. At the moment when Han Fei left, a sword light fell and blocked Huobuli and Yu Meng. At the same time, a cold voice sounded in Han Fei's mind. "The 4 palaces are not on good terms with the Grand Pure One. There will be a battle sooner or later. Now that the palace is about to open, there will be no battle. Nothing will happen." Han Fei didn't have time to respond and flew tens of thousands of kilometers. Under the terrifying suction force of the vortex, Han Fei finally saw the entrance of the savage abyss after 5 seconds. "I'm finally here." Overjoyed, Han Fei controlled the navigator and rushed into the eye of the abyss. Han Fei had experienced the collision of enormous energy once before, but he didn't have a chance to experience it carefully. This time, Han Fei had broken the barrier and experienced it. He felt that his body was almost broken apart. However, when Han Fei pointed at a light spot with the navigator, Han Fei saw a person. It was none other than Chun Huangyan. Seeing Han Fei, Chun Huangyan said, "Take a guess. Can you resist one of my projections? Or should I hand over the princess and let you go?" "Hand over my ass." Han Fei picked up a green gourd in his hand and shouted, "Old Yuan, kill him for me." At that moment, power surged out of Han Fei's body. In the infinite darkness, demonic flames surged, and a gigantic claw appeared and slapped. Chun Huangyan narrowed his eyes. "The remnant soul of an emperor? Humph, you're just a remnant soul of a demon. How dare you try to kill me?" Chun Huangyan raised his hand, and the power of his finger burst out. The overwhelming demonic flames pierced through the calabash. The power of the finger didn't even disperse. It simply stabbed the giant calabash that Han Fei was holding. Thud poo, huh? Han Fei vomited a mouthful of blood and was flung back together with the calabash. While Chun Huangyan was smiling, he suddenly turned around, only to see that a streak of demonic chi was dispersing at the entrance of the light spot behind him. As it turned out, Old Yuan's attack was not meant to attack Chun Huangyan, but to escape with Han Fei's body. Swoosh! In the next moment, Han Fei, who was blown away, was gone, and so was the gourd. The demonic chi vanished in the light spot. A voice was left in midair. "Chun Huangyan, you old fart. I'll break your bones and cook soup when I return." Chun Huangyan's eyes were cold as he mumbled, "What a Gemini divine technique." Chapter 1861. Buzz. He rushed into the entrance, and as soon as he rushed into the light spot, he felt a terrifying suction. In front of Han Fei was a huge millstone. He had once come out of this millstone. At this moment, Han Fei turned into two clouds of mist, one black and the other white, stirring in the millstone. When the speed reached a limit, Han Fei was crushed by the millstone. When he came back to his senses, he had already left the millstone. However, at this moment, Han Fei suddenly heard two voices. Xiaobai said, "Daddy, I'm going to break through." On the other hand, inside the sea-quelling painting, Water Luster reported, "Master, the crab eggs are moving. They will hatch soon." Han Fei thought of something. "Daughter, wait a moment. Don't rush." There was still a suction force in this space. Han Fei had to take advantage of this time to get out of here. And if he wanted to go out, based on his experience, Han Fei knew that he had to use the Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel. Buzz, the Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel appeared, and Han Fei said telepathically, "Little black, little white, hold on for another half a day. After we go out, we can make a breakthrough." When he came here, he came through the bottomless pit of the Scattered Stars Island. If he went back, he would naturally return through the bottomless pit. Under the effect of the Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel, Han Fei estimated that he could get rid of the suction force of the Yin-Yang Great Millstone in less than half an hour. At this time, Han Fei was returning with the help of the rotation of the Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel. However, it was different from when he came. When he came here, he just needed to fall freely. On the way back, the rotation of the Supreme Yin-Yang Wheel brought with it a massive amount of energy. In the past, when he left the Savage Abyss and went to the Chaotic Azure Sea, he was injected with a lot of energy. Now, that energy had been digested and absorbed in various ways over the past 2 years. Even now, he had only digested 10 to 20% of it. Of course, the energy that had gathered could also be devoured. Han Fei said, "Old Yuan, how are you?" The old tortoise said weakly, "I can't. Fortunately, that guy was just a projection. If his real body is there, you won't be able to escape. We can confirm that he has indeed reached the heaven opening stage." "Son of a bitch," the old tortoise said, "I can accept it if I have this son." Han Fei was lost for words. "You think I'm joking?" That means you can still hold on. When we get back to the yin-yang heaven, I'll use the Heaven Awakening Divine Art to help you recover. At this moment, Han Fei was leaving this bottomless pit. Xia Shaochan, Nian'er Xiao Se, Earth 9, and the others all surrounded the sea area in the sea-quelling painting. Xia Shaochan stared at the crab egg and said, "Just now, a lot of power suddenly surged into the painting. That's probably the reason why it's going to be born. Unfortunately, the energy is still not enough." In an instant, Xia Shaochan threw the hexagon starfish out. "Big starfish, open your mouth and feed the little crab." The hexagon starfish couldn't have felt better. "I'm not familiar with this crab. Did you see how much energy it consumed just now? In total, there were 1,000,000 supreme-grade spirit stones and more than 100,000 spirit fruit. Oh my god! It can eat more than a starfish." However, Xia Shaochan grabbed the hexagon starfish's tentacle. "Big starfish, why are you so stingy? All the resources in your sect are mine. I'll give them to you if I want." At this time, Han Fei's voice suddenly sounded in the sea-quelling painting. Han Fei said, "Master Hexagon Starfish, throw the supreme-grade spirit stones out. I'll absorb some energy from the outside. Girl, we're about to return to the yin-yang heaven. We need to wait for another half a day." When Xia Shaochan heard that she was about to return to the yin-yang heaven, she immediately exclaimed happily. Xia Shaochan said, "I have energy." Han Fei was speechless. "I'm wrapped in infinite energy. I'm about to explode, everyone." The hexagon starfish hurriedly said, "Give it to me, give it to me." Everyone suddenly felt that a massive amount of energy was poured into the world. Although it was not so pure, everyone had their own cultivation method. When it operated, it would naturally remove the impure energy. Under the supply of energy from Han Fei and the ultra-quality spiritual stones that the hexagon starfish reluctantly took out, the crab egg gradually burst out with dazzling light. In just a moment, cracks appeared on the crab egg with a cracking sound. Gotcha! Under everyone's gaze, with a crack, a crab claw suddenly pierced through the crab egg. The hexagon starfish asked in confusion, "Why does a crab have an eggshell?" Xia Shaochan said helplessly, "That's not an eggshell. It's a solidified crab egg." Crack, pieces of the shell peeled off, and everyone soon saw a small blue-red crab, about a foot long, looking at them with crooked eyes. In the outside world, Han Fei was still supplying energy all the way. But at this moment, the king crab in the sea-quelling painting had reappeared. Its energy demand was not so high. At this time, the tree spirit and the fire seed were quite happy. This was the first time that such a large amount of energy resources had been channeled into the sea-quelling painting. However, 3 hours later, they didn't think much of it anymore, because more and more energy was channeled in. At first, it only landed on the sea. However, it soon began to slowly fill the sea-quelling painting. After several hours of massive channeling, the energy level in the sea-quelling painting was nearly 8 times higher than before. It was a good thing to have more energy, but it was not necessarily good to suddenly inject so much energy. The growth of ordinary living beings had to be done in an orderly manner. With so much energy suddenly pouring in, he couldn't absorb it even if he wanted to. Fortunately, all of a sudden, Han Fei felt that his body was lighter. The suction force from the abyss had completely disappeared. The energy obtained by the supreme yin-yang wheel from the outside world also gradually decreased. To be on the safe side, Han Fei still maintained the current state. After half an hour, Han Fei's heart thumped. He seemed to have touched the threshold of going out. With a hum, Han Fei withdrew the supreme yin-yang wheel, tapped his feet, and rushed out crazily. Yin-yang Heaven, Scattered Stars Island. Luo Xiaobai was discussing something. All the Exalt Realm experts in the commander's estate were seated here, and there were an entire 38 of them. The Yin-yang Heaven was different from the outside world. Any pirate ship of the top 10 pirate groups in the outside world might have dozens of venerables. However, Here, dozens of venerables gathered, which meant that something big had happened. One of Luo Xiaobai's group said, Jing when the wall of death cracked this time, our Yinyang heaven was the first to bear the brunt. Can you ask Her Majesty to support us venerables? Jing sighed softly. I came in person, which shows Her Majesty's friendly attitude towards the Yinyang heaven. I can fight against 10 venerables alone. Besides, when I came, the wall of death on the Shuemu heaven's side also began to have problems. 2 years ago, the number of cracks that suddenly appeared on the wall of death was still relatively small. Today, 10 hours ago, hundreds of cracks appeared on the Shuemu heaven's side. The fact that I can come to the Yinyang heaven at this time means that Her Majesty has done her best. In the crowd, Shueshenqi said, Her Majesty is a pioneer sea-state expert. Have you found out the reason why the cracks appeared on the wall of death? Jing shook her head. I can't find out. Even if Her Majesty is powerful, she can't explore such a large sea area. She can't split the wall of death and go in to investigate, can she? When I came, the wall of death was in a precarious situation, and Her Majesty was already there in person. Luo Xiaobai frowned and looked at the people of the Scattered Stars Island. We can't wait any longer. I have to tell the Scattered Stars Island. Everyone below the hidden fisher level must leave the Scattered Stars Island and evacuate to the Shuemu heaven. Then, Luo Xiaobai said, Open the passage between the Yinyang heaven and the Shuemu heaven, and fully open the teleportation arrays from the 1,000-star city and the 36 towns to the Scattered Stars Island. Tell all the people that this is a crisis of life and death for mankind. The entire Yinyang heaven is ready to move. For a moment, everyone's face darkened. Since they understood the structure of the so-called 36 mysterious heavens, who would be willing to live under someone else's palace? Everyone had believed in the sea god for their entire lives. Now, they were suddenly going to the Shuemu heaven. In the future, would they still have to believe in the Life Queen? However, after Luo Xiaobai made this decision, no one objected. The leaders of the 7 major sects all stood up. We'll take the lead and arrange for people to do it immediately. Luo Xiaobai acted swiftly and decisively. There was a problem with the wall of death. This was the news brought by Jing. More than 4 hours had passed since he received the news, and the people on his side had sent back the news. There was very little time left for Luo Xiaobai to prepare. Once the wall of death was broken, countless powerful explorers would be waiting for them. At that time, with the situation of the Yinyang heaven, it would be impossible for them to cope with it. Therefore, Luo Xiaobai directly set the tone at the beginning of the meeting. The entire Yinyang heaven would be relocated. At this moment, the sky-hanging curtain appeared, covering the entire Scattered Stars Island. Suddenly, someone exclaimed, Oh! The sky-hanging mirror appeared again? Since General Han left, this is the first time that General Han has used the sky-hanging mirror, right? Someone said solemnly, It's General Luo Xiaobai. She has always been cautious. It can't be a trivial matter for her to use the sky-hanging mirror. Hurry up and return to the team. Someone sighed. The sky-hanging mirror appeared. What happened? Luo Xiaobai's indifferent and cold voice sounded in the sky. Luo Xiaobai said, On the Scattered Stars Island, everyone immediately put down what you are doing. Everyone, listen up and quickly find your superiors. Rogue cultivators quickly gathered outside the transverse mountain. 6 hours ago, cracks appeared on the wall of death, and a great disaster was about to come. Millions of explorers may bring disaster to the Yinyang heaven. In order to protect the foundation of the human clan and continue the bloodline of the human clan, I have decided that from now on, the entire Yinyang heaven will move to the Waterwood heaven. Hiss, what? The wall of death is broken? Isn't it unbreakable? Even kings can't get in. How could it be broken so easily? F***ck, it's over. Hurry up and go to the transverse mountain. F***ck, Why did you only inform us now about such a big thing? Someone said, don't complain. General also said that the wall of death was just broken a few hours ago. Who would have expected it? Luo Xiaobai's face was heavy. In the sky, she repeated the arrangements. Then, she immediately changed her words and said, all law enforcers of the Scattered Stars Island, return to your positions and make arrangements for the personnel. Give me the fastest time to bring them to the passageway to the Waterwood Heaven. I, Luo Xiaobai, will buy time for everyone. Please cherish every second from now on. Chapter 1862. In the past 2 years when Han Fei was away, Luo Xiaobai managed the Scattered Stars Island in good order. Even because the sea demons near the Scattered Stars Island were wiped out, the Scattered Stars Island, and even the entire Yin-Yang Heaven, had ushered in a comprehensive development. Whether it was the number of high-level cultivators, the supply of spirit awakening fluid, or the effect of children's spiritual awakening, they were all several times higher than decades ago. And this effect was continuing to improve. In addition to cultivation, in terms of refining and alchemy, there were also more manpower. Under the trend of rapid development, everything was thriving and flourishing. Before Han Fei, many supreme commanders were defenders, protecting the Scattered Stars Island. Han Fei, on the other hand, was a general who conquered cities and territories and wiped out all the enemies. And Luo Xiaobai was a person who planned development, trying to improve the cultivation environment of the Yin-Yang Heaven to a higher level. However, ordinary people might be immersed in the tide of the rise of the overall strength of human beings. However, for strong masters like Luo Xiaobai, the situation was different. They knew that whether it was the Yin-Yang Heaven or the Waterwood Heaven, there was actually a great threat, and that was the Wall of Death. The Waterwood Heaven was fine because it had a king, but the Yin-Yang Heaven didn't. The strongest masters of the Yin-Yang Heaven were currently Chao Tianji and Tang Yen. In the absence of Han Fei, the two of them were in a state of mutual check and balance. But in fact, the reason why they didn't take over the entire Yin-Yang Heaven was because of Han Fei. At this moment, Luo Xiaobai announced to the entire island and made a temporary decision to migrate. The determination in this decision was unprecedented. Luo Xiaobai said to migrate, but was it really easy to migrate? From the 1,000-star city to the 36 towns, how many people had no talent at all? Their strength might only be at the fisher level. These people didn't even have time to travel. Did they really have a way to migrate? This series of questions turned over in Luo Xiaobai's mind many times. However, as the supreme commander of the Scattered Stars Island, the first thing she needed to consider was to preserve the foundation of the human race. She had to make a choice at this time. Many strong masters understood the difficulty of Luo Xiaobai's decision. In fact, everyone knew the seriousness of the matter. After all, Han Fei had already told them about the Wall of Death. However, many ordinary people did not know. At this moment, when they heard that they were going to move as a whole, someone exclaimed, "Ridiculous! We are all people with families, our wives and children are still in the town. How can we leave? No, I have to go home and pick up my wife and son." Someone expressed his confusion. Running away after encountering something? Was it just a crack? Perhaps it would take a few years, a few decades, or even 100 years for it to split open. Is there a need to be so exaggerated as to move immediately? Our Yin-Yang heavenly human tribe has lived here for tens of thousands of years, and we've always been safe and sound. How could we choose to live or die in just one day? What kind of earth-shattering crisis could scare all the human experts to this extent? At this moment, Luo Xiaobai came to the top of the Empyrean waterfall in 100 seconds. Han Fei's incarnation, or this was Han Fei, was talking to Luo Xiaobai. "You're so busy, but you still have time to come to me?" Luo Xiaobai said. "I came to you as soon as I made the decision, because I suspect that this matter is directly related to you." Han Fei narrowed his eyes. I vaguely have the same feeling, Luo Xiaobai said. The crack on the wall of death happened exactly a few days after you left. You said at that time that the wall of death wouldn't have any problems for a while. However, since it has appeared, it's suspicious. Today, both the Yin-Yang heavens and the Waterwood heavens have problems. I thought it was you who came back. However, more than 6 hours have passed and you haven't shown up. I can't gamble, so whether you come back or not, I have to make this decision. Han Fei's face turned a little ugly. There's something I have to tell you now. Luo Xiaobai asked, what is it? Han Fei raised his hand and a bunch of scimitars appeared in his hand. Luo Xiaobai looked at the pair of scimitars in confusion. Han Fei said, this is called the Blade of Hope. In theory, it should be a top treasure that surpasses the sea-quelling bizarre treasures. A few months ago, it came back and brought back a memory. Luo Xiaobai's face turned slightly pale, but she still gritted her teeth and said, speak. Han Fei sighed slightly. The memory brought back by the Blade of Hope is some insights and some regrets of my original body before it died. Unfortunately, Xia Shaochan found it. It's a pity that my original body may have died. After all, Han Fei's incarnation couldn't connect directly to the outside world and couldn't synchronize memories with his original body. The Blade of Hope was incorporeal. It had returned with a mission in the first place. This mission was to let Han Fei go to the outer domain again, find his body, and take back everything that belonged to him, including the demon purification pot. These days, Han Fei had been hesitating whether to tell Luo Xiaobai this news or not. However, now that there was a problem with the Wall of Death, he had to tell her. Luo Xiaobai was silent for a long time. In the end, she took a breath and said, got it. Zhang Xuanyu and the others should be back. Get ready for battle. You are not a half-king now. You are only a peak-level junior venerable. It's not bad for you to fight 2 peak-level junior venerables. Han Fei's eyelids twitched and he said with a smile, are you underestimating me? I can fight 10. After Luo Xiaobai announced the decision to relocate, the entire Scattered Stars Island fell into a complete panic. In the 10th hour, the 36 towns, the 1,000-star city, the level 3 fishery, all the places in the Yin-Yang heaven that could be notified had been notified. There was a steady stream of people heading to the Scattered Stars Island. However, the channel between the Yin-Yang heaven and the Waterwood heaven was there. Even if people were stuffed in non-stop from the beginning, how many people could be stuffed in? However, after all, the size of the entrance was limited. Even if many people didn't want to evacuate, there were still many people who were willing to obey orders. There were billions of people in the Yin-Yang heaven. How could they just pass? In the 10th hour, the Scattered Stars Island was already overcrowded. What did it mean to take refuge? That scene was exactly like this. Looting, smashing, plundering, killing. These things that most people didn't dare to do usually were happening everywhere now. After all, Luo Xiaobai couldn't stop those short-sighted people. It was still okay on the Scattered Stars Island. In the 1,000-star city and the 36 towns, even if such a thing happened, no one could deal with it. At this moment, Luo Xiaobai stood high in the sky, looking at the chaotic scene, and a trace of sadness appeared in her heart. All her efforts suddenly collapsed because of a sudden news. This situation, this scene, this mixed feelings, all gathered in front of her. At this moment, she suddenly remembered the sentence she heard in the ideal palace. Yes, she shouldn't have remembered it, but she suddenly remembered it. All under the king level are ants. All living beings are sacrifices, and no one can escape. In a trance, Luo Xiaobai suddenly felt that this sentence was very appropriate. All living beings were ants, and ants begged for life. This was the portrayal of the great world. Perhaps this was also the portrayal of all races. Crack! At that moment, a faint blue light appeared on Luo Xiaobai's body. She had broken through to the intermediate venerable realm. Han Fei saw this scene. At this moment, Han Fei, Zhang Xuanyu, Lu Renquang, Tang Gu, and Mu Ling were also here. Mu Ling sighed. You shouldn't have put such a heavy burden on Luo Xiaobai, a girl. Han Fei said, Xiaobai is the best candidate I can think of. You can't blame her. The place we live in is full of danger. BM Han Fei was just about to sigh. Suddenly, everyone raised their heads and looked into the distance. Zhang Xuanyu exclaimed, There is surging spiritual energy and energy rushing over. What's going on? Hum Tang Yan's voice directly appeared in Han Fei's mind. He said, Let me tell you of very bad news. There are dozens of big cracks on the wall of death. The enemy may be coming. Han Fei's face suddenly changed, and he said in a low voice, The wall of death is broken. Swish, swish, swish. Everyone's faces turned ugly at that moment. What they were most worried about still happened. However, they didn't expect that the wall of death would be broken so quickly. It had only been more than 10 hours. At this moment, Chao Tianji suddenly appeared next to everyone. Chao Tianji looked at Han Fei and said, If I can't defeat the enemy, can I not enter the Waterwood Heaven? Facing this half-king realm powerhouse, Han Fei calmly faced him. Han Fei said, If you can't defeat the enemy, the yin and yang and the Waterwood Heaven will eventually become one. Are you in a hurry for this period of time? Chao Tianji's face was solemn. Do you think you can block it now? Han Fei said, Then it depends on which side will come out of the cage first. Han Fei couldn't judge based on the place he entered. Because Han Fei suddenly suspected that the cage was actually running. Or it might be like the operation of the earth. For example, the Forest of Horrors was connected to the Blood Sea Divine Wood City. For example, he went to the territory of the Demon Beast Alliance from the Yin-Yang Heaven. For example, the Black Blood City could directly attack the Yin-Yang Heaven, and the Black Blood City was opposite to the Beast Island. Therefore, it was impossible for the Yin-Yang Heaven to connect these two places at the same time, but it did. Therefore, Han Fei suspected that the cage was moving. Who would come first? He didn't know. Han Fei naturally told this idea to Luo Xiaobai. Therefore, until the last moment, everyone still wanted to take a gamble. Chao Tianji said, Okay, let's see who will come first. To Han Fei's surprise, the first thing that appeared millions of kilometers away was a creature in the form of a dragon. In fact, it was like a strange tree with tentacles. If Han Fei were here, he would definitely know that this was the dragon octopus tree of the Forest of Horrors. Chapter 1863. Yin-Yang Heaven. More than 3 million kilometers east of the Scattered Stars Island. The dragon octopus tree was swimming in the water. Its huge body swayed while killing a large number of ordinary creatures. Around the dragon octopus tree, strange vines would emerge from the void from time to time, which were exactly the void vines wandering in the void. In addition, there were giant snakes swimming forward like dragons, which were exactly the serpent vine. On the head of the serpent vine, a purple-haired girl shouted, Slow down. There are still a large number of demonic plants behind us. Why are you running so fast? An old guy carrying a bamboo said, We're already out. From now on, we're free. Don't panic. Let's find a place to settle down first. Then, we'll explore this world. The tree man of 1,000 dragons frowned and said, Have we come to the Yin-Yang Heaven or the Shuemu Heaven? It's said that there are kings here. We'd better be careful. Luo said, The Waterwood Heaven is full of demonic plants. The Waterwood Heaven shouldn't be too hard on us, right? The dragon octopus tree said, The spiritual energy here is too thin. It's like heaven and earth compared to us in the cage. Can they become strong masters in such an environment? Sea Bamboo said, Hee. No matter how weak the spiritual energy is, there can still be strong masters. I wonder if we'll meet Lord Blood King. Whoa, Luo said, Everyone, even if we meet him, I don't think we should trust him too much. What's the situation here? We need to figure it out first. The Void Vine said, I feel that there are a lot of spatial fluctuations in front of us, about 3 million kilometers away. It's very dangerous. It's like the fluctuations of an ordinary teleportation array. Serpent, let's go and have a look, Sea Bamboo said. Slow down. Wait for the demonic plants behind us. The speed of a half-king realm powerhouse was, of course, extremely fast. How long could it take to cover a distance of a few million kilometers? Even if someone was delaying them, their speed was still extremely fast. In less than half an hour, a group of demonic plants appeared within 1,000,000 kilometers of the scattered stars island. They weren't in a hurry to move forward at all, and they were just passing by. Suddenly, Luo, Sea Bamboo, Thousand Dragons, and the others all raised their heads and looked at the void. Buzz, 20,000 kilometers away, the cloud whale swayed in the sky. It soared between heaven and earth and quickly disappeared from everyone's field of vision. The dragon octopus tree, a big fish that can fly in the sky? To be able to discover us from so far away, he must be a half-king, right? He's stronger than me. Luo said. It doesn't matter, he didn't greet us. Now, some of us from the Forest of Terror will be the ones to go first. The people of the Monster Beast Alliance were retreating from the battlefield and rushing over. A mere half-king isn't a problem at all. Haiju said, Don't be careless. Voidvine, go and scout out the situation. How many experts do they have? The Voidvine said, I've already sent a portion of my body forward. Very soon there will be feedback. Humans, so many humans. We don't seem to have come to the Waterwood Sky. Orochi-man said, Are you sure? Blood King, didn't you just go to the Waterwood Heaven? He said how good it was there. It doesn't make sense that he went to Shuemu Heaven and we came to Inyang Heaven. The Void Vine said again, It is indeed not the Waterwood Sky. There were so many people here, billions upon billions of humans. There is also a monster plant island next to it. That is, Hiss, the legendary land monster plant, 9-headed snake grass? What is that? 9-headed snake grass? Is there really such a thing? The Void Vine said again, There are also giant vines patrolling the sky. Wow, is that a heavenly vine? The dragon Zhongshu said, Really? Isn't that the land monster plant in my inherited memories? Are we going to fight, or what? Luo said, Don't get hot-headed and fight. Land monster plants and sea monster plants are all monster plants. But is this the Inyang Heaven or the Waterwood Sky? I heard that the Waterwood Sky has a king, but I have never heard of the Inyang Heaven having a king. Won't we know if we go and take a look? Not good. Suddenly, the Void Vine let out a low growl. Everyone looked over and asked, What's wrong? The Vine of Void said, Part of my body was captured by someone. The Void Vine roared, How dare you? How dare you touch the Forest of Terror? Are they tired of living? Luo said, All of you, shut up. This is not a cage. Who knows about the Forest of Terror? Let's go and take a look and get back the Void Vine's body. Haiju Rin knocked the bamboo pole and said, Little Sue, you just don't pay attention to cultivation. If the energy tides hadn't become more and more frequent this year, when would you have reached the advanced venerable realm? Qianlong echoed, That's right. Otherwise, you would at least be a peak stage venerable by now. Some peerless monster plants in the Forest of Terror were slowly moving forward. However, they were about to reach the Scattered Stars Island. On the other side, another crack appeared on the wall of death. With a thud, a big black conch crashed into it. Ha ha! The big conch began to laugh wildly. He laughed and said, Han Fei, I'm here again. This time, without the help of the Immortal City and the Demon Beast Alliance. Let's see what the Inyang Heaven can do to me. Who else could it be but the Black Killer Snail King? The Black Killer Snail King didn't transform into a human form but crazily crashed into the crack. He shouted, Snail Soul, Zhang Wuming Yu Tianai. Work with me to tear the crack. Try to open the crack in half an hour. I'll take you through the Inyang Heaven. On the other side of the crack, there was a faint vibration feedback, which probably meant, Got it. At this moment, Luo Xiaobai had just completed her breakthrough. Anyway, at the moment of her breakthrough, Han Fei and the others all threw out their resources. Therefore, Luo Xiaobai's breakthrough was very smooth. However, as soon as Luo Xiaobai opened her eyes, Chao Tianji suddenly appeared. His big hand pulled out a half-real, half-illusory vine from the void. Chao Tianji looked at Han Fei and Luo Xiaobai and said, "I've caught an advanced venerable realm monster plant. This guy is very secretive. If it weren't for its weak strength, it would have probably avoided my sight." Han Fei looked at it and said in surprise, "The void vine?" The void vine seemed surprised that Han Fei knew it too. It immediately said, "You know me? Since you know me, you should know that this is just a part of my body. I advise you to let me go. The army of the Forest of Horrors is right behind you. If I lose a layer of skin, no one on your side can afford it." Chao Tianji snorted coldly. "How arrogant!" Han Fei quickly stopped him. "Wait a minute," Han Fei frowned. "Forest of Horrors?" In the cage, the Forest of Horrors and humans never met, and they only had conflicts with the Demon Beast Alliance. The monster plants of the Forest of Horrors hoped to absorb the powerful vitality and power of the Demon Beast Alliance to nourish themselves. And the Demon Beast Alliance liked to hunt monster plants. Whether it was used to make weapons or to get their natal spiritual fruits, it would be very profitable. However, there was no deep hatred between the Forest of Horrors and humans. If it was just the Forest of Horrors, Han Fei had Chao Tianji, Tang Yen, Li Daxian, Jing Er, Ren Tianfei. In this way there would be a lot of strong masters. If he could delay them, or persuade them, or at least give them a delaying tactic, the great migration plan of the human race could be carried out according to plan, and it would be able to last for a while. After all, negotiations could also delay time. At this moment, Han Fei had asked Ren Tianfei's clones to go to the Waterwood Heaven and the Yinyang Heaven to look for traces of the Demon Beast Alliance and the Immortal City. As long as they found one, they would have a chance to fight. Han Fei said, "Let him go. The monster plants are not our enemy. We humans have always been on good terms with them. The Void Vine, right? You can ask the Half-King Powerhouse of the Forest of Horrors to come and talk. If there is a fake king, we will also welcome him." Everyone froze for a moment. What's with Han Fei's reaction? Han Fei thought to himself, "I'll stall for as long as I can. I'm familiar with the Forest of Horrors. I can make up a story myself." The Void Vine snorted and said, "You little boy, you're only a beginner, Venerable. Are the half-kings here not as good as you?" Han Fei smiled and said, "We humans believe in the rule of the superior. Wisdom is the foundation of our race, not strength." The Void Vine said, "Interesting. The people of the Forest of Horrors are coming." As it spoke, above the sky, a super tree-shaped octopus tens of thousands of meters long swept across the sky, covering the sky and the sun. On the Scattered Stars Island, countless people who were rushing to the Scattered Stars Island for migration were all horrified. "What the hell is this? It's so big. It's even bigger than the cloud whale. I'm afraid it's 100 times bigger. Is this an octopus? The wall of death is really broken. Not good, everyone, run." Someone was maintaining order and shouting, "Calm down, calm down, calm down. The General and the Venerables are here. Even if we have to die, it's not your turn." Suddenly, someone exclaimed and pointed at the sky, "Look, dragon, the legendary dragon." However, someone roared, "Bullsh *T, that's clearly a snake. How can a dragon look like that? Dragons have horns and feet. What the hell are you talking about? Let's go to the Transverse Mountain as soon as possible." At this moment, the people on the Scattered Stars Island saw the largest creatures in history, the dragon octopus tree and the grand snake vine. There was only fear in countless people's hearts. For ordinary people, the bigger they were, the more dangerous they were. Wow, the wall of death has just cracked, and such terrifying and powerful creatures have come to the Scattered Stars Island? Many people felt that the sky was collapsing. They felt that God was going to destroy the human race.